Okay, so if I could have everybody's attention. Toby and Matt, please separate and. Sit down.
The meeting hasn't even started and I'm already in trouble.
Yes, I expected nothing less, Matt, so, all right. So good afternoon. I am Jackie Buchanan and I happen to be the current chair of the IGBC. So that's the role I'm in today. Normally, Deputy Regional Forester for the Rocky Mountain region. And as part of that responsibility, I oversee part of the greater Yellowstone ecosystem with the Shoshone National Forest. And so I have some responsibilities in my day job. And then I'm in my second year of being chair. I have with me my co-chair, or I don't know what's the proper terminology, David? For
Vice chair.
My vice chair, and one of my new best friends, Ed Schriever from Idaho Fish and Game. Is that correct? Am I saying?
Correct.
See, I practiced Ed before I got up here. So Ed will be coming in behind me as chair at our December. We'll transition in December. And then what you see here and some of the folks on the screen are the actual members of the IGBC committee. And then we are very excited to have, of course, I think some members of the public, some community members here, and then a lot of folks who work with us who really are some of the core folks with the grizzly bear knowledge that are sitting back there too. So it's very exciting. This is the first time we've been able to meet in person for 2 years because of COVID. And we know the challenges we've all faced with dealing with the pandemic. We had folks that were actually going to come this week that had to stay at home because they tested positive for COVID. And so it's just a reality. So what we're going to do today, and David, I have to introduce David Diamond, who is our coordinator, organizer, keep us all straight, and really he's the mastermind behind pulling the meeting together and a lot of the work we're doing. So we've come up with a hybrid, right, David?
We're trying hybrid. We'll see if I'm speaking, if my face comes up, and look, it does. I'm not sure what the folks on the out there are seeing. Hopefully they're seeing a big picture of this room as opposed to the little boxes of the teams. What I would invite is that for members of our IGBC executive committee that are joining remotely, if you could turn your cameras on, you can keep yourself muted until you want to speak or raise your hand. I've got Jennifer Fort Norris with the Fish and Wildlife Service with me, who's going to help sort of facilitate the online portion of the meeting, so that if you need to raise your hand or be recognized, she'll note you and see now what you don't see on our end is that we see you on the screen, and so it's like we're at one big table here that is hybrid.
So we're excited to try this. We may have a few pains as we go through it, and I'm probably. It's hard to know where to look, but I think the owl is following me, and so I wanted to look out at all of you as I at least gave the opening comments. And the core work of IGBC is working with the bears in supporting recovery, delisting, and ongoing conservation of the grizzly bear and the habitat in the western United States, northwestern United States. We do also work with our Canadian partners because, we're interested in what they're doing. They're interested in what we're doing. And, we'll see how the grizzly bear goes across. I don't think the grizzly bear cares about the Canadian-American border. So we do work closely with them as well. And I think we have some members joining us, right, David?
Yes.
From the north. So excited about that. Each executive committee member is either a proud representative of one of those states that have grizzly bears or have a population, or a federal agency, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Park Service, BLM, U.S. Forest Service. Who am I missing, David? Anybody? I don't know.
Yes.
All the federal land management agencies, Park Service, Fish. Yeah, did I miss part of that? Okay. So the members of the committee are either representing one of the states or representing one of the agencies. And we are all committed to doing our part in conservation and of the grizzly bear conservation and management. So let's talk a little bit about the pillars that we're working on. And, from around recovery, on the recovery piece, we're thrilled to be here because we're in an area that has been identified as one of the populations that we're working with and working towards hopefully eventual delisting. We're lucky enough here to hear from some folks in this community today that are going to share kind of some of their the work they've been doing, what they're thinking about, maybe some concerns they have, and what they want us to be aware of as a committee as we come into this area. And we'll be out on the ground tomorrow, kind of looking at the situation. So the recovery piece is a big part for us, and it really is a success story. I mean, we've gotten to a place that maybe folks couldn't imagine we would have gotten to 40 years ago when our committee was initiated or when we started this work. So that's part of the work we'll be doing this week. Delisting, it's a big topic. And I think one of the things we have to be mindful of or aware of or at least put on the table is we still have some uncertainty about what that means. What is the path forward for delisting and how do we come together and find a unified path forward on the delisting topic? And there's a lot of concern and high level of interest from the states and around that topic. And so we're going to talk about some of that this week while we're together and see what we're doing. David, did you know what that was? All right. Hopefully it was not as critical. And then ongoing conservation, one of the topics I think you're going to hear about even later today is from the Board of Review on the fatality from last year, and Ovando, right? Ovando, Montana. And so when we talk about conservation, part of what we have to do is think about, we have bears, in areas where there are people. And so what can we do? What lessons can we learn? How can we communicate that out? Because nobody wants a bad outcome, and fatality is the worst outcome, right? And so we're going to hear that report and maybe do a little thinking about what can we learn and how do we carry that forward. We have some exciting stuff. Where's my friend there? That we're going to hear about the Bear Smart Community Working Group. They've been doing fantastic work, and we had some discussion around this topic in March. There's a proposal that we hope to move forward, and again, one of the best pieces of work we can do from a public spectrum is kind of the community outreach, the awareness, the communication. How do we make people get into as good a place as possible in dealing and living in areas where there are grizzlies? And so super excited about that topic and the discussion we'll have around that. And then one of the other things that we talked about in March, we had kind of a strategic discussion around the work of the exec committee and then all of our subcommittees and the 5-year plan for the work that they're doing on behalf of the IGBC exec committee. And so, what does that look like and how do we finish up that discussion? And then tomorrow, we're again going to have some time out on the ground. And it's been a couple of years since we as an exec group have been able to get out and walk and talk and look at things and kind of be able to touch, what's happening out there. And so we're going to spend some time tomorrow in this area with some folks who will give us kind of some perspectives on what is happening here. So it's a pretty action-packed week. For 2.5 days. David, I get carried away because I wish it was a week, but 2.5 days. And the role of the public and the role of all of you that are here because you have some interest in this, we really do want to hear from you. We're interested in your perspectives. We're interested in what you think makes sense and what you think doesn't make sense, or what are we missing. And so, we work for the public. We all represent, again, a state or a federal agency, and but that works for the U.S. public. And so we want to hear from you, whether you're joining us, and it's really weird, David, because I feel like I need to look there, but whether you're joining us virtually or you're here with us in person, we really do want to hear your thoughts. So it's an exciting agenda. We have important work ahead of us. How am I doing time-wise? Okay. And so for the next about 15 minutes or so, I'm going to invite a couple of folks from the Idaho Panhandle Collaborative. We've got Brad Smith and Liz Johnson who are here and kind of helping us think about, what's happening in this ecosystem. They're going to share with us their kind of thoughts and maybe welcome us to Monterey Ferry. And I just ask everybody to, stay with us, participate, and listen, because I think it's going to be some meaningful work. Okay, and then David, what did I miss?
Perfect. So if Brad and Liz could come forward.
Do we get to be on camera?
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind, and maybe just join the table up there in the front.
Liz, I messed up your name, I think, so it's Liz
Johnson.
Johnson.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Johnson's a lot
I
easier.
wrote it down, yeah, stop the Johnson, so, all right, so I'll turn it over to you guys. The owl will follow you, so, stand up here.
And if it's helpful, we could go around and do introductions with the executive committee, so that the idea here is this is a meet and greet. We're being welcomed.
First, so we can find out who everybody is. That would be great.
So, and I wonder what the right way to do that is. I guess we could start with the table.
Yeah.
And then the executives that are on the virtual.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So why don't we start there?
Hi, I'm Hillary Cooley, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the recovery coordinator and advisor.
Covers pretty much all the their range state.
And hi, I'm Deb Okeson. I'm Deputy Regional Forester in the Intermountain Regions. So we have the Bridget Tucson that we target.
I'm Jennifer Fortune Norris. I'm just with the Fish and Wildlife Service Grizzly Bear Recovery Program. I'm just assisting with IT today.
And you're
Pretty cool.
Yeah, we're grateful. And I'm David Diamond. I'm the executive coordinator of the Interagency Grizzly Bear Committee.
And Jackie Buchanan, current chair of the Interagency Grizzly Bear Committee and DRF out of Denver.
Ed Schriever, Director, Idaho Department of Fish and Game, co-chair.
That's it.
No, vice chair.
Vice chair.
Vice
You can be
chair.
whatever you want.
A return to the executive committee for me. I sat on this committee some years ago on behalf of then Director Virgil Moore, and then took a hiatus. And I guess I'll say I'm happy to be back. See how this goes.
Gary Bertolotti, I'm with Montana Fish and Wildlife Parks Regional Supervisor, representing NCPE for Kurt Steele on the vice chair of the NCPE right now, and then also sitting in place for Tim McDonald, who is our wildlife chief, who is out of town right now. So.
Hey, good afternoon. I'm Chris Savage. I'm the Renewable Resources Management Director for the Northern Region of the Forest Service, located in Missoula, Montana.
I'm Rick King with Wyoming Game Fish Department. I'm our chief game warden and chief of our wildlife.
So and then we have a few more on the screen. And so I'm going to first ask, are you able to hear as the conversation moves around the room? Are you able to hear what's being said? Sort of. So well, I'll just ask folks to try to speak up so that our remote attendees can hear. And so maybe we'll stay, Hannah, if we could start with you.
Sure. Good afternoon. Ooh, I heard it echo. Hannah Anderson with the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife. I'm sort of mostly hearing you all. The owl is not quite following folks, just so you know, but I'm mostly hearing everything. Great to be here.
Could you hear me, Hannah?
I can hear you really well, Jackie, and you too, David, and Ed, I can hear. It's the sides that were a little challenging.
It's not moving.
Okay, so next, Michael.
Good afternoon, Michael Burwash, Associate Director of Wildlife with the Fish and Wildlife Branch. province of British Columbia.
We will be getting close to there
We will.
to tomorrow, but not quite. Jennifer.
Good afternoon. My name is Jennifer Carpenter. I work for the National Park Service. I'm currently Chief of Resources here in Yellowstone National Park. I'm so disappointed I cannot be there with you, but Mother Nature had other ideas for the park and for me personally. So I am unable to attend in person. I am representing the Intermountain region of the National Park Service. So that's Yellowstone, Grand Teton, and Glacier. Thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer. So then Jackie with the Forest Service.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jackie Gross. I am the Assistant Director for Natural Resources for Region 6 of the Forest Service, which is the Pacific Northwest region covering Oregon and Washington. And I'm grateful to be here this afternoon. Thank you.
Thanks, Jackie. And Ruth with BLM.
Good afternoon. I'm Ruth Miller, and I'm the Deputy State Director for Resources for the Montana Dakotas BLM. For those of you who knew Mike Philbin, he retired at the end of March. So I'm taking Mike's place. And we're back into the high community level spread of COVID. So sorry I can't be there in person either.
Well, thank you and welcome. And then finally, Frank with the USGS.
Yeah, Frank Vermaelen, normally advisor to this committee, but this afternoon I'm sitting in for Claudia Reagan with the USGS Northern Rocky Mountain Science Center.
Thanks. And have I missed, is there any other member of the committee? It looks like maybe Don. Don.
Janice.
So either member of the committee or chair of a subcommittee or representing a subcommittee today. And that includes our colleague there from the Park Service, Don.
Hi, David. Thanks for noticing. I was going to try to do this first meeting in total stealth mode, so thanks for calling me out. I'm Don Stryker. I'm new enough to hope the honeymoon is still in place. I'm the superintendent at North Cascades National Park, so sort of the incoming chair of the, as the new guy, the incoming chair too of the North Cascades ecosystem. But I'm deferring on all things NPS to the far wiser and more experienced Jennifer.
Thanks, Don, and welcome.
Thank you.
So that's us. So Bonner County.
So you may want to come closer to the owl though, just okay, so I have
sorry, I missed one. I apologize there, Liz. JJ, there's your camera. So the another of our subcommittee chairs.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Sorry I couldn't make it. Mother Nature called myself. I'm a JJ Tier Regional Supervisor, Idaho Fish and Game out of Lewiston, and I chair the Bitterroot Subcommittee.
Thanks, JJ.
Thanks for
welcome.
having me.
Okay, that is it.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so Liz Johnson-Gebhardt. I'm from over in Priest River, and I want to welcome you on the Sandpoint because you're not quite to Bonner's Ferry yet, but you're going to get there, from what I understand. I run a small organization over in Priest River. It's called the Priest Community Forest Connection. We've been around for about 22 years. We do a lot of different restoration programs, usually with agency folks, Fish and Wildlife, Forest Service, IDEQ, IDL. So it kind of depends on who needs help. As we're a nonprofit, they're able to bring the money to the table and we're able to implement the projects. So that's pretty much what I do. We also do a lot of forest education programs, mostly for school kids. And I'm going to point to the bear education programs to Brad when he gets up here, because I think their group does a whole lot more of it. But I've also chaired the Panhandle Forest Collaborative for 12 years or so, I'll guess, since the day it started. And I think we're very interested in helping any agency folks and especially the public understand bear and human conflict, bear and human love, whatever you want to call it. But I think that we have a lot more people moving into this area. It is becoming a bigger and bigger issue because we have more bears as well, which in my opinion is a good thing. But there are a lot of people that are not aware of how to be in the backcountry or even in town and deal with bears. We just had a few folks from U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service on our last meeting that we're talking about the Priest Lake area. And people would come up there and they're like, oh, this is so cool. We have a bear on our porch. No, that's really not true. And so just getting the education programs out there, I think is really important. From my perspective, especially because I deal with school kids, we start with the little ones. And we get them to understand what this really means. We have a thing called the Forest Expo that has all different kinds of stations, hands-on stations. But one of the main ones is with wildlife. And we feel that if we can teach kids to respectfully camp and know what recreation means out there and what wildlife means and what that kind of, and how they can merge and be that person that's aware of these things, they tend to bring it home to their adult parents and pretty soon are starting to teach them. So that's my perspective from where we come from. I'm going to kind of turn it over to Brad, but we can go back and forth because Brad does a lot of actual bear education programs and a little more.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brad Smith with the Idaho Conservation League. And like Liz, I represent ICL on the Panhandle Forest Collaborative, which works on Forest Service projects on the Sandpoint and Priest Lake Ranger districts. And then tomorrow, I believe you all are going to be meeting with the Kootenai Valley Resource Initiative. Yeah. I'm also a member of that group. And each of those stakeholder groups, you're probably familiar with these kind of collaborative groups that come together that have, you know, representatives from the environmental community, from the timber industry, local government, state wildlife agencies, Forest Service, etc. And anytime there's a project on Forest Service ground, the federal ground, the Panhandle Forest Collaborative and KVRI up north get engaged. And a lot of these projects, you know, are forest management projects, but sometimes have wildlife components to them and projects that are in grizzly bear management units. Sometimes we get involved in, you know, working together as a group to identify roads that might need to be closed or put into storage to meet the access amendment requirements. And I don't see anybody here from the Idaho Panhandle National Forest, but I believe all the BMUs in North Idaho will be up to standard by the end of 2023. Christy Johnson is shaking her head.
That's the goal.
So, you know, those collaboratives have been a really good place to, you know, kind of figure out where people can accept those road closures to help with grizzly bear recovery and our habitat needs. The other thing that has happened recently that I think is of note is a stakeholder group was formed to provide input on the winter travel management plan for the north zone of the Idaho Panhandle. See a couple of other people in the audience that were part of that. And we just, last week or the week before, voted on a proposal that we advanced to the Forest Service with almost unanimous support for winter travel management plan that, you know, when grizzly bears come out of hibernation would essentially limit motorized access to designated routes in grizzly bear habitat. I was a part of that and was really happy with the outcome and the work that was done between, you know, folks who participate in winter recreation and wildlife interests to really come together and deal with what are some very passionate feelings and issues around access and conservation, and was really pleased that we were able to come up with something that most people could support. But now that will go to the Forest Service and it's up to them to decide what to do with those recommendations. Obviously, the Forest Service retains any decision-making on that. We'll go through the public NEPA process, and I think their goal is to be done with that by the end of 2023 as well. And then just a couple other things I wanted to bring up was really happy when I think it was the Fish and Wildlife Service provided some funding to Idaho Fish and Game as part of the Bog Creek Road decision to do some conflict prevention work in Boundary County, which is really needed. And we have a lot more needs. You know, you've all read in the news about the livestock depredations that occurred up near Naples. But here in Bonner County, we also have some needs too. So as a Bonner County resident, I want to make a plug for Bonner County because, you know, we've got grizzly bears showing up at places like Rapid Lightning. My cousin lives up there, and last year was he lives just down the road from the farmer who I think Fish and Game had to come and help them set up electric fencing around their orchard last year. There's been grizzly bears at Schweitzer. And then Priest Lake is like this whole other mess because, you know, there's a lot of seasonal residents that come primarily from Spokane. They have cabins around the lake or they visit the resorts up at the lake and have no idea about living in bear country. We've got sanitation issues, food storage issues. And I'd really like to just make a plug for upping our game on conflict prevention in these communities because you know, we're just seeing more and more issues with people moving into grizzly bear habitat. So thank you all for letting me talk.
I'm going to add to that, actually, the Priest Lake thing. So we've done a number of projects way up by the border, north of Priest Lake, grizzly bear country. And it's interesting because folks, those of us that are on the ground, we're in the project, we know what we're doing. But it's the looky-loos that comes through and they want to know, and they are throwing stuff out their windows and they don't get it. And I don't know where you start because Brad is so right that a lot of the seasonal people that come up to Priest Lake are from out of the area. And so they're just up there to go whoop it up and have a great time. But there are serious things going on up there. And when the bear has to be put down because people are being stupid, that's really upsetting to a lot of us around here. So I live on the top of a mountain, end of the road, 100 acres, and I have bears all the time. But I know I know how to deal with that, and they are really good bears. So I think that the education thing is really, really something that needs to be focused on, especially as this population grows, both bear and human wise. And I don't know how to deal, and maybe Brad has some ideas, but I don't know how to deal with the seasonal folks as well, because it kind of tends to be a seasonal thing with bears as well. So when they come out in the spring, maybe you don't have as many people around, but then people come back and hunt in the fall and then they're still around. So it's kind of a weird thing, but I'd love you folks to talk about it and think about it.
Thanks so much to you both. Really terrific to be welcomed and to get oriented a little bit before we do our visit tomorrow. I guess I'll ask quickly if there's a question from the group here for Liz or Brad. Well, I mean, you'll see on our agenda this afternoon, we're going to be talking about conflict in communities and ways to help communities, you know, get moving in that direction. And we're also going to hear about the next thing on our agenda is a very serious topic, which is, you know, what happens when things go completely wrong. So I really want to thank you for joining us. Appreciate the work of the collaborative and all the work that you're doing. I look forward to visiting a little bit here. We're going to have a break not too long. So.
And can you stay with us?
I'm not going to be able to stay very much longer, but I would say if you guys have anything that you want the collaborative to try and help with, if you think that there's some way we can aid in what you come up with and need, don't hesitate to get a hold of us.
And we are, this whole session is being recorded. So if you want to look at it later, it'll be on our website. Yeah. And so, you know, encourage you always you can follow back up. There's a lot of stuff that's on the website, and David is really working to get it really upgraded.
Yeah, you sent us this stuff, which was great information. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much. Really appreciate it.
You transition.
Okay. So next up, and while we'll flip the computer here and share the screen so that you can see the presentation, I will introduce Hillary Cooley from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service with the Board of Review report from Ovando, Montana from last year.
Hey, David, are we doing the agency updates first?
No, we're going to do that a little bit later.
Oh, yeah, behind. While she's pulling up, do we want to see who's with us in the audience?
Sure. Do you need a second? Okay, so we'll just recognize the folks that are here in the room. If you could stand up so that hopefully, I don't know how far this, it looks actually it goes pretty far. Stand up and introduce yourself very briefly, where you're from, and what affiliation, if any, what you want to share with us. We'll start here and go back.
John Stiver with USDA Wildlife Services. I'm the Assistant Regional Director for the Western Region of Wildlife Services. Out of Billings, Montana.
Go back. We've already met Brad and Liz. No.
Scott Jackson, U.S. Fish.
No, no.
Forest Service, National Carnival Coordinator based in Missouri.
We'll take you back anytime, Scott. Christy Johnson Hughes, Fish and Wildlife Service. I'm the Assistant State Supervisor of the Coeur d'Alene office. So this is my area that I work in. Welcome. It's so great to see you. And also I'm here representing the Selkirk Cabinet Yak Subcommittee.
Hi, everybody. Jody Bush. I'm the Deputy Assistant Regional Director for Region 1, which is the Pacific Northwest. And Hugh Morrison, who is our Region 1 rep for Fish and Wildlife Service. He's a little bit late today, so I'm kind of representing him through this week.
Josh Uriardi, I'm with the Idaho Governor's Office of Species Conservation, State of Idaho.
Shelby Goodrow with Idaho Fish and Game.
Jared Hedelius, USDA Wildlife Services, State Director for Idaho Wildlife Services, and I'm based out of Boise. I'm Shane Robinson with Wildlife Services. I'm the Wildlife Services Specialist for this area up here. I cover the 7 northern counties in Idaho.
Lori Roberts. I work for the Northern Continental Divide for the state of Montana on the grizzly bear research team, and then I'm also the IEO chair for this.
Ben Jimenez, with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Grizzly Bear Recovery Program. I am the conflict coordinator.
I'm Chuck Brody, Bonner Ferry, Boundary County to the north. I'm really tired from the forest products industry, and I also sit on the collaborative Cruiser Valley Resource Initiative in Bonner.
Tony McDermott, previous Idaho Fish and Game Commissioner for the Panhandle region, and I also served on the collaborative.
Kathleen Trevor with the Idaho Attorney General's Office.
Krista Shires, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Director, Billings.
Okay. Thank you all. It's just good to know who's here, and we appreciate y'all being here. Okay.
So thank you. So now we've got a sense of who's in the room, and I'm going to now turn it over to Hillary.
Okay, thanks, David. Jen, can you forward for me? You can leave it here for a second. I'll give a summary. So an interagency group just recently finished a board of review on a fatality that happened actually on this day last year. Leah Davis was from California, and she was killed by a grizzly bear in Ovando, Montana on July 6th in 2021. A board of review is listed in the recovery plan, and it's something that we do after every human fatality. The way it works is the initial investigation occurs, is all the first responders, they put together many different reports, and it takes, the whole process takes a long time. We waited for the DNA to come back. And then the recovery office puts together an interagency group of people that go through the investigation and come up with one summary document. And the main purpose of it is to look at it and learn from it. And so there's a whole list of recommendations, especially for this incident, because it was a pretty complicated one. So David, I think the report, I sent you the report, it's up online now, or it will be shortly.
It is online. You can find it under the executive committee meeting materials in the same place that the agenda for the meeting is.
Okay, great. And I know a lot of people are waiting for it. It's pretty substantial, so take a look at it. I'm just going to give a real brief summary and then go through the recommendations. I first want to give condolences to Leah Davis's family and her friends, and to the community of Ovando. A lot of first responders from the community were involved. Other community members were involved that day. A lot of follow-up has been done by community members as well. So a big thanks also to the community. The Powell County Sheriff's Office, Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks had a lot of people involved, a few Fish and Wildlife Service people, and a number of staff from the Blackfoot Challenge. So the team that was involved in this second part, the Board of Review from the service, it was
It says
Jennifer,
they can't see it.
myself and Wayne. We had a number of people from Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks. We had Glacier National Park staff. Carrie Enos from the Salish Kootenai Tribe, Confederate Salish Kootenai Tribe. And Dan Tyers from the Forest Service was involved. So next slide. I wanted to orient you, if you don't know where Ovando is. Ovando's in the NCDE. It's about 1 hour from Missoula, northeast. Can you forward, Jim? The red star there. So it's real close to Missoula. They have had grizzly bears for a long time now. And then go one more, Jen. Aerial photo of Ovando. Ovando is not a municipality. It's a town. It's in the Blackfoot watershed. It's a very small place. Where that star is the center of Ovando, and that's where this incident happened. So I'm going to just read a short summary of exactly what happened. So Leo was a 65-year-old female from Chico, California. She was on a multi-day bicycle trip through Montana and rode into Ovando on July 5th to stay the night. She decided to camp behind the museum next to one other tent. It was, you can kind of tell by that star there, it's like a patch of grass. It's not a campground, but they allow people to put their tents up. It could fit maybe 3 tents. So there were 2 tents there. About 3 a.m. on July 6th, Ms. Loken and the neighboring campers were awoken by a bear near their tents. They got up, made noise, and the bear left the area. At that time, Ms. Loken had food in her tent, and she moved it from her tent into a nearby building, also took bear spray with her into the tent. They went back to the tent and went to sleep. After returning to sleep, the neighboring campers were awoken by noise. That was about 4 a.m., so 1 hour later, they realized that Ms. Loken was being attacked by a bear. They yelled, deployed bear spray, blew a whistle, and the bear ran off. They got up, and she'd been dragged out of the tent and showed no signs of life. So then they ran and got help. Emergency responders were dispatched. Jen, you want to flip again? Just thought it'd be helpful to put the timeline together. So about 7 p.m., they set up tents in Ovando. It came out, a lot of information came out later that evening sometime. Nobody was at that bear broke into a camper about 4 miles west of Ovando. Nobody was there, so they don't know exactly the timing, but so that evening, the bear was 4 miles away. Overnight, the bear moved to Ovando, came into town and started sniffing around the tents about 3 a.m. A half hour later, the bear was caught on a security camera right in the community there. And then it went back to the tent and attacked. People got up, they called dispatch. A few minutes, EMS was on scene. And right after the attack, the bear went 2 blocks away and it broke into a chicken coop. WP set a trap there. They did a helicopter search that morning. No bears were found. Second helicopter that night. They may have seen a bear, but it ran away and they didn't see it again. Then that night, the bear came back to the chicken coop. Nobody saw it. They found it out. It was on a trail cam and they detected it later. Didn't linger, didn't go into the trap. Next day, they did a 3rd helicopter search with thermal imaging, no bears. Following day, they got a report at another chicken coop. This time it was 5 miles east of town at traps. And that's where when the bear returned, Wildlife Services was there, shot it, and took samples and confirmed that was the correct bear. So these are just to orient you, the two pins in the middle,Ovando's there, and they saw the bear the likely bear that they spotted from the plane, or from the helicopter that evening was real close to Ovando. Then you can see where they trapped the bear, where it hit the chicken coop, and they were able to kill the bear 2 days later, 5 miles west of town. Our conclusion, it was a predatory attack by a habituated or a food conditioned bear. Predatory attacks are rare, but they do happen. Food and toiletries inside the tent, as well as food inside and near. There was a bike bags. There was food in the bike bags that were not removed. And it was July 6th. There was July 4th celebrations. They had been cooking in that area. Those were all likely contributing factors. So we came up with a lot of recommendations on this one. Some of them we know, some of them, the recommendations are just things that came to light. It doesn't mean they did something wrong, but it just, reiterated the need to emphasize. Keep food and anything with a scent out of tents and well away from tents. Properly store unattended food, anything else with a scent. Don't tent in the same area where food is cooking. You should cook at least 100 feet from the sleeping area. If a bear comes into the vicinity of an occupied tent, do not return. Try to move to a hard-sided vehicle or a building if possible. We came up with a number of recommendations for towns or communities and municipalities, just urging people to be aware that bears could be anywhere in western Montana, even in residential areas. Urging towns or communities to consider food storage regulations or ordinances on both public, also consider it private lands throughout Grizzly Bear Range. Put up signs, bear aware signs. Consider participating in the Bear Smart program that Lori's going to be talking about next. Private campgrounds should provide bear-resistant food containers, food storage, and place bear-aware signs. I just want to add something here. We talked about this at the NCDE subcommittee. Hip camps are like Airbnbs, but for tenters or RVers, and anybody can rent out their land for camping. There's one right now close to where I am, St. Ignatius, and it's a hip camp. It's like a highway for grizzly bears, and the landowner set up a campground. They're right on the creek side, and there are bears walking through. The tribe, I live on the Flathead Reservation. The tribe stopped to talk with them. They won't put up signs. They won't put food storage. They won't put any bear cans. So it's going to become a bigger issue, and it's kind of scary. Bears should not be allowed to feel comfortable near houses or any human activity centers. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service will put out approved deterrence methods that anybody can use, and we urge people to take a look at those. They're on our website, and do that. Try to safely move the bear away. If it doesn't respond, then you need to call the agency that's responsible. It could be us, could be Idaho, could be Montana. Help move the bear out of the way, but don't let it linger. This was part of an organized bike event, and so we came up with some recommendations for organized events, recreation events. That they should consider bear education and food storage requirements as part of the federal land special use permits. And the organizers should disseminate bear education materials specifically about camping, if camping is involved, recreating in bear habitat, and require bear spray. Emphasize being observant at all times and keeping bear spray close at hand. And encouraging the communities along the route to endorse bear spray, provide food storage bins, electric fence checkout kits, and put up barrel wear signs. We also this was a really complicated one. It one of, the investigation and then the search for the bear was 3 days. And so we have some recommendations for responders to implement a wildlife human attack response team or a WART team. Those typically have really strong protocols, procedures, and that was important in this case, has a very systematic approach to the investigation. Conduct a full necropsy. Might be stomach contents that will help you later. There might be an injury that was responsible for the bear acting differently. Standard disease testing, rabies, or other issues that should be checked. And if the bear is caught, protecting the head and the claws for DNA, they did that, and we were able to successfully collect DNA from the bear. Document a full chain of custody for all samples. And then this one, we were asked about the hide and the skull, and that you should treat whatever you do with the remains of the bear with extreme sensitivity for the family. We've been talking about this one for a long time. Land management agencies should consider and enact food storage orders and guidelines throughout grizzly bear range. I know we're making progress on that, but we just wanted to reiterate. And this one, finally, I think this is the last one for bear spray manufacturers. This was Leah's family came up with this one and wanted us to put this in the report. She said, can we ask the manufacturers to see if they could develop a whistle that would be attached to the trigger, so when you spray, it would, blow the whistle, and people would hear that, and it would alert people, something's happening. Maybe it would deter the bear, kind of an added deterrent for the bear. And that concludes the report. No, if anybody had questions.
Lori, I had one, and I heard this, and I don't know if it was, you hear lots of things in these incidents that turn out to be true or not true. And again, to your point, not from a standpoint of blame, but more of a lessons learned. I've heard you mentioned that the July 4th celebration in town, lots of food sense maybe around from that. I'd heard that the dump in town maybe was either electrified or at least had a gate around it, and then maybe in the call the comings and goings with July 4th, that was maybe inadvertently left open, and the bear may have gotten into that. Did you ever hear that or discover that during the formal investigation?
It never came up. I never heard that.
Okay.
Anybody online with questions? I guess
Could I say?
Well, this is the.
Could I ask something or make a comment? My wife and I were there, and we just returned to Ovando a few weeks ago, and the progress that community has made is incredible. The things they put in place is incredible. Their response to the needs of everybody was incredible. So we wanted to share that what you're talking here and trying to get, Ovando's put it all in place. It looks like they did the Bear Smart program. They have bear canisters all over town. Tent camping is no longer allowed. You have to be in a 4-sided building. So they're protecting the bicyclers such as us and everybody that goes through that town. And that goes back to what your program is stating and what you're trying to do with everybody. So we just want to thank you. So thank you very much. And that's it for me.
Thanks for that. And you're right, I was in Ovando on Wednesday. And they have made a lot of progress. And they're also putting an electric fence around a baseball field that's like in town as well, that campers can use it, because I think this is a frequent stopover for bikers that come through there. Is that my timer?
Sorry about that.
That's it, you
We're
know.
done, out.
No, I don't actually want to cut off discussion here, and thank you for sharing that firsthand account, and thanks for the work of the committee. I guess, Hillary, any other theories or thoughts about the predatory behavior in this instance? I know you say it is very rare.
Well, it's interesting. We've got the DNA. We collected DNA from the bear and sent it to the lab in British Columbia that houses our database. And the mother and father were both handled in the past, and both of them on the Flathead Reservation. Well, both of them multiple times. I don't have the list in front of me. They were picked up by Kate Kandell's research, one or both of them. I can't remember. I have to go back and look, and it's all in the report. And they were also both at separate potential conflict sites. Never identified with certainty that they were the culprit. One was a depredation and one was, do you remember, Lori, what conflict?
Yeah,
the other one
they were
was?
both on the Flathead Indian Reservation. One was at a depredation, the other one was food, like anthropogenic
Yeah.
garbage or something like that. And then when the mother was identified, may have been the particular bear may have been a cub with mom at the depredation.
Okay.
Like that was the same year that his
Okay.
his birth.
But it was a while ago, a number like 4
Yeah,
or 5 years ago.
Yeah, he was what, 5 years old?
Yeah,
That was
right.
2015.
Yeah,
I don't know his actual, I forgot his actual.
yeah. Jamie was wondering, Jamie Jonkel, the bear specialist there, he was wondering if this bear spent a lot of time in Sealy Lake, which is really messy. They don't have a lot of things in place to keep attractants secure. But we don't really know.
Thank you. Any other questions for Hillary or looking around? So that's then, a very serious reminder about the importance of the work, not just of the federal and state agencies, but really of everyone who lives in these areas. And that is a good segue to hearing from Lori Roberts, who is with Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks. She's the chair of the IGBC's Information Education and Outreach Subcommittee. And she also has led the Bear Smart Working Group that this executive group, has sort of charged with thinking through a potential IGBC program. So I will turn it over to Lori.
Yeah, thanks. This was brought a couple, I think about 2 years ago now in the winter meeting. This idea was brought to me by Kim Johnston, who had been working with the town that I'll mention later on in my talk. And there was a BC program that we kind of based our program on, but we kind of altered it a little bit. And so we have had a lot of meetings and a lot of discussion, and we hired a writer, editor, Andrea Morehouse, and we have come up with what we think is a really good product. And so today I'm just gonna go over briefly because we have some new members from when this first started. And then we would just like to have hopefully a really good discussion about what the executive committee thinks about it and how they want to move forward with that. And so we have a lot of decisions or options and ideas in your memo, and so we can go over those. So I just wanted to start very broad. We all recognize the Northwest here. I don't know if anybody can see them, but there's the recovery zones, the 6 recovery zones across the U.S., the Northwest, at the Maybe present. So that's where grizzly bears are known to be present. And if you hit it again, there's all the towns that are in those areas. And so there are towns that have already done some things. There are towns that are following the BC program. There are towns that are, trying to figure out how to get started. There's towns that the specialists would like to be talking to about getting started on theirs. And shockingly, there's towns in recovery zones that are still, without their resistant garbage containers or close to the recovery zones. So, go for the next slide. But we also have not just a growing bear population, but we also have a growing human population. And so from the 2010 census to the 2020 census, these are the areas, the green, the darker the green, the higher increase in population there was. And then Jennifer, in the purple, Idaho, which where we are now, it was one of the largest growing states of the pandemic. Grew 2.6% or 3.9%. There was a couple different numbers in the article, but it was definitely one of the largest growing states in the western U.S. As far as human population. And then Montana also grew. And so as the people that got up and introduced us to Bonner County were talking, Liz said, we have a lot of new residents, seasonal residents, always new challenges. Oh shoot, that's got me. Can you want to come back? All right. So we had a really great bear working group. Like I said, Andrea Morehouse, who's actually up in Canada, we hired her as a writer editor. She'd been working in Alberta doing kind of some of the same work. We had the IEO subcommittee for the IGBC, and there's the list of folks that were in there. I included Kim Annis. She was the Selkirk Cabinet, and now Christy is the new Selkirk Cabinet. Kim Johnson with People and Carnivores, Jeremy Nicholson with Idaho Fish and Game, Kyle Garrett and Dan Thompson from Wyoming Game and Fish, Michael Badgery, who ran the program up in British Columbia. He now has moved on and no longer runs the program, and then David Diamond sat in on a lot of our meetings, and then Chris Edmond, she was in the beginning, she was working for WCS, but she's moved on to work in Alaska. The overall goal of the program is to support a collaborative, community-based strategies that benefit both people and bears by reducing conflict and improving human safety in areas where people and bears share the landscape. And as you look across these different recovery zones, and you look at the conflicts, the types of conflicts that bears are causing, there's a lot of livestock depredation across all the different ecosystems, but there's also a lot of conflicts with humans, and a lot of those are due to garbage and bird feeders and apple trees and things like that. In the NCD, over 54% of our conflicts are anthropogenic or unnatural food conflicts. And so it's still things that could be secured, but they're not, and theirs are still living there too. And so we came up with 4 different criteria for the program. And so the first criteria is that the community establishes a Bear Smart committee. And this is supposed to be very representative of the actual community, because not every community is going to be the same. Some are going to be more of a livestock community. Some are going to be more of a tourist community, tourist and recreation. So we want it to be very representative of the community, and we want them to work collaboratively. And another part, so the first thing that committee has to do is they have to assess their community. And here is a list of the different things that we would like to look at when they look at their community. We want them to give a good description of their community, where they're located, what's their surroundings, what's the bear population near or in that community, the habitat and wildlife corridors that they have, any history with human bear interactions, and they can get this from their community members or from the local state agencies. What kind of attractants do they have? What kind of education and outreach efforts are they already doing? So do they have education and outreach in the schools? Are they trying to touch base with their community members? And how are they trying to touch base with their recreation and tourists that come in, or their seasonal? And then we have, what is their solid waste management that they employ? What times does it get picked up? When can people leave their garbage out? What type of hauler do they use? What type of trash cans are they using? The community development, and then enforcement. So is there any laws or regulations already in place that are enforceable? And then hearing from the actual community itself. What are the concerns of the community? Do they feel safe? Do they not feel safe? Where don't they feel safe? So that the committee that's writing up this plan can have a feel for what the community itself is feeling about bears. And once they finish the assessment, they can move on to a plan. And we would like them to use that assessment to really look at their community and say, how are we going to attack this problem? And how are we going to, not attack the problem, how are we just going to make our community more safe and better for humans and bears? And so here's kind of the list of different parts of the plan that they can do. And the biggest, I would say the hardest ones are going to be the timeline and the budget, because none of this is going to move very fast. So making sure that they have a good plan in place, how they're going to do it, and hopefully how they're going to get that plan into place. You know, we hope that they will move forward and go do good things. And so, you know, some of those things, especially a lot of it is going to be waste management in these communities, you know, talking with their trash hauler, putting their trash out at a certain time, bringing it in by a certain time, using bear resistant containers. This is a picture from the Missoula paper recently, where Public Service is starting to hand out more bear resistant containers. They're starting to employ their smart community program. You know, putting up electric fences, that picture down in the corner is in Cook City. Defenders of Wildlife just put up an electric fence around their composting for the school that's there in Cook City, up by Yellowstone. And then we do a lot of education and outreach, bear fairs, wake up socials, forestry expos, anywhere we can about bears. So what the group, we put together this, or what we've been working on for you guys to talk about and think about, is we put together and provided, what we will be providing communities is a Bear Smart manual. And so here's, you all got copies of the manual. It talks about bear behavior, and it kind of introduces what conflict is. It goes through the program criteria. We talk about a certification process, but I put it in question marks because that's up to you guys to decide if you want to make it a program that we're going to certify. We don't have to use that word. You can use a different word. There's a lot of good references. We tried to do as much as possible to reference the state that people are in, so that if you're in Montana, in your community in Montana, you'll go to the Montana website to get information from them. Wyoming has a really great Bear Wise program already in place, so they can go there. And so we're trying to, so you can use this guide, use those references to to assess your community, build your plan. And then we do have some templates in there and examples of an assessment and a plan. And then one thing we're still working on that's not a part of the manual right now, but we're working with a couple of social scientists from the University of Montana, the MEDCAS, to put together some social surveys so that the communities will have a survey to hand their community members to help with the assessment, to talk about what kind of conflicts they've had, what types of conflicts, so then they could get those back. So it's another way for them to reach out to their community to build that assessment. And then we also are building a survey to talk about the Bear Smart program itself. So as the program continues to evolve, if there's issues or problems, the manual and the program itself can evolve with that. Another thing that we're providing communities, we put together a PowerPoint. So if a community member wants to address their community, their city council, and say, hey, there's this great program out there, it's called the IGBC Bear Smart program. We'd like to see if this community is interested in it. We put together a PowerPoint which they can edit and put in maps for their community, but it helps them step their community through the process and how to do it and what to do. So it explains the importance of why becoming Bear Smart, gives the program criteria overview, and then of course there's information about how to become certified if that's what we're choosing. And there's also a one-page brochure that goes with that. So you can so if a community is interested, we can say, here you go, here's how you can start things out and get your community interested in the program. Here's a brochure, here's the PowerPoint. So then, going back to this map, you can hit one more button, it'll be a little circle. I wanted to focus in on Virginia City. Virginia City's slide, but I forgot to bring it down. But I did want to say a couple things about Virginia City, because that's where Ken Johnston with People and Carnivores worked at. And they mainly, the bear activity was all black bear related, with conflicts within the community in the past, with multiple black bears being relocated and or removed due to primarily garbage related conflicts. The Yellowstone grizzly bear population has been expanding in recent years, and now the current range is at the edge of Virginia City, and after grizzly bear tracks were verified within a few miles of the community decided to step up efforts. So they worked with Madison County, worked to secure the local refuse transfer container site with electric fence. They partnered with people and carnivores, and the town of Virginia City decided to take efforts towards becoming Bear Smart. The community replaced all unsecure public trash cans with steel garbage, bear-resistant garbages and recycling canisters. They started a fruit gleaning program in the fall to raise awareness and offer volunteer fruit gleaning to reduce attractants in the community. They offer annual bear awareness training and have created a line in their town, and have created a line in their town budget each year to support the Bear Smart community effort. And so this is a quote from the mayor of Virginia City. He says, "Before the town went Bear Smart, you could drink a beer at the Pioneer Bar and watch a black bear mosey down the boardwalk, tipping over every 55-gallon garbage drum in line. Before the bear made its way back to the back of the restaurant, it happened every night for a week in 2016. And every year there was a problem. Now, we've cut down incidences in town, and bears in town to almost to the point," he says, "knock on wood," of no existence. Since taking efforts towards becoming a Bear Smart community, we've seen great success in reducing our bear conflicts and making the community safer. And so I guess I just kind of want to leave you with that. And since we first brought this topic up, I've had a lot of phone calls where I've given them the manual saying, this is just the draft, here's the idea. You know, there's also the BC program that people can follow. But like I said, we've had conflict specialists that are interested in approaching communities. We've had communities themselves that have called us and to ask us to talk them through what the different process was. They're interested in it, but right now we're on hold until guys make a decision. So if you look at your packet, I guess, I don't know how you want to do this, David, but in the packet, we put together kind of 3 options to talk about the actual program itself. And then we've also kind of put together the option to have someone run the program. I think a big part of the program is having a program director. Then you would have someone to kind of review the plans, review the assessment, make sure people are on the right track, make sure that communities aren't kind of going over their authorities and saying, you know, things like no bears will be destroyed. And we've written down a list of descriptions of the person who did it. So the program director would do.
So, you know, one thing I just want to say is thank you, Lori, and thanks to the crew that's worked on this tremendous amount of work. And I know you've drawn from some existing programs, but holistically really put us, and I think did a service to many folks with what you've come up with. So just want to say thank you. You know, I'm a pretty big supporter of this. And you know, for all of you, and we do need to get to a decision point on this. Because, you know, if you're going to move forward with this work, we need to move forward with it. You know, we had the report from Hillary on the fatality, and a lot of recommendations you came forward with centered around communication and community awareness and what can a community do to help eliminate, or you can't really eliminate, but you can limit greatly the attraction for bears. And so when we think about, you know, what we can do for service to communities and to the public, you know, this is a big opportunity. But in saying that, it also does take support. And so as we consider this, we need to think about, you know, what can we commit to? I think we have the right representation here that can, you know, represent whether it's a state or an agency where we stand. But I certainly think from my view, not as a chair, but as a Forest Service representative, you know, Region 2 is highly supportive of going forward with, well, for us, you know, probably not option 1. And again, I'm not in chair mode, I'm in Forest Service mode, but at minimum option 2 or 3. But you know, the numbers are increasing, and the population's increasing. So that doesn't make for a good mix without doing something. So thank you, Laura.
And I think, you know, it's great because we do have a lot of boots on the ground. Like we have our bear conflict specialist, and then there's the states, Montana, Idaho, Wyoming. We've all put more people on the ground you know, and that's always helped me, but I think this is a way too that put it back into the community's hands and give them the opportunity to kind of take consideration of the future of their community. It's good.
And it sounds like Orlando is a good example of folks who have stepped up
Yeah.
after a bad experience. Okay. Anybody else? Matt?
Lori, just ask what Jackie said, awesome work since the last meeting, so kudos to all the folks involved. And I too think the idea is solid. I can check a couple questions, and please don't interpret them as not being supportive, just trying to understand. So maybe Rick's better to answer the first one. Rick, Bear Wise is a specific program in Wyoming.
Right, yeah, it's a program that started in the Code area, but it's essentially expanded the philosophy and concept to the entire UIE in Wyoming. So,
And does Game and Fish administer that?
correct.
So I guess my overarching question is, absolutely, this makes sense. There's lots of people playing in this space. One of my, I guess, pet peeves in the conservation community is like it seems like our answer is typically form a new organization when we encounter a problem, and then we just create more infrastructure and bureaucracy and less money go into the ground. And I'm not suggesting that's what's going on here, but we've got Bear Wise in Wyoming. We're proposing this. There's a program in British Columbia, and then there's all these other groups playing in this space. Is there potential it's going to get too diffused as opposed to you're just going to confuse people? Like, which program do I go with? Do I go with this one or that one?
Or duplication of effort too.
Right.
We
And
don't
that's a
wanna do
great
that.
question because, you know, when Kim brought this to us, you know, she said, well, here's the BC program, we can use their stuff. And I read through the BC program and we did take a lot of their ideas because it is basic ideas. And even people that don't follow these, they do assess and you build a plan and things like that. But I think what I've thought about while I've been looking at this, because we have Big Sky, you know, Big Sky, or Bear Smart Big Sky, we have Bear Wise. This is an actual written manual that that people could follow. So Bear Wise is it's a great concept and the state kind of runs this. They have a coordinator, but they don't actually they work with the community themselves. It's not, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. I've talked with you and Dan a lot, so I've been trying to figure this out, but like, this would actually be like a community anybody could initiate it. You know, it's not the state of Wyoming going and working with the community to do plans. It's the community, people in carnivores could initiate it. You know, Chris Servine is initiating a big Bear Smart program in Missoula right now. And I've given him a draft of the manual to kind of start to follow. And so that's kind of the difference. Like and I do think that having someone run it would be very important because then you have someone that can keep things consistent. Because that's what BC does. They have their program, Bear Smart BC, and it's strictly a BC. You can follow it, but you're not going to get any kind of recognition from it. And maybe you guys don't feel like there needs to be any kind of recognition. I was kind of thinking about that too, and thinking like, why do we buy organic? Why do we buy made in Montana? Why do we buy made in Idaho? Because there's a feel good behind it. This is, why do you want to become Bear Smart, IGBC Bear Smart? Well, it's because it was put together by, experts that have thought about this and thought about how you could take better steps to reduce conflict and increase human safety, and that helps your community know that you're doing the right thing for everybody, for people that are visiting, for people that live here, and you're educating them. And so I feel like we are making a new program, but we're making a program that people are going to collectively come behind and be behind, and it won't be one entity doing their own thing and this entity doing their own thing. It's going to be a lot of entities, a lot of communities coming together and being a part of one big collaborative. I don't know.
Yeah, that was helpful. So maybe a follow-up if I could, Jackie.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you mentioned several communities already exploring this and setting up, you said Bear Wise, Missoula. So what changes based on our action today, whether we endorse it or don't endorse it, whether we pick basically the no action or one of the other two alternatives, what changes in your mind with those folks who are already doing this?
I think we can give them support. I think if we put it on the website, it's there, people can do it. But if we put it on the website and give it support, it'll be a lot better. They'll continue to do it because they have to continue to give us, to continue to give IGBC updates. We've said every 5 years, that's up for debate with this group, but that's not set in stone. I think that if you look at the list, potentially monetary support for those communities to help them with their education programs, to help them with the bear resistant containers, to do different things like that. And then I think it is a way to also help support collaborations. Collaborations with NGOs in the areas, with the bear specialists themselves, with potentially other agencies that can help out.
So
Where if we just put it on the website, it's just there for someone to use and use it as a guide, and it maybe doesn't always get updated and it might fall behind.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
So
it would be my.
Matt, I want to jump in here. I've got a couple of things to take care of. And first, again, just thank you so much, Lori, because the paradigm shift here is that it's IGBC potentially as an umbrella, encouraging communities to go through this process, either with explicit staff support from IGBC or on their own. Those are the two options. And then, as Lori just mentioned, the hope is in either of those two options, being able to point to the IGBC program could be helpful to communities in finding additional support, from other parties. So it is a paradigm shift for us in that it's not a federal or state agency doing the work. It's encouraging and potentially supporting the communities that are going to be leading the way. So having said that, I want to recognize one of our executives has joined, Hugh Morrison. Hugh, do you just want to say hello? I hope you're feeling okay.
Thanks, David. Yeah, glad to be here with you all. I appreciate hearing the presentation on bear smart communities, and I think there are some good questions being asked here. Yeah, I'm feeling 95%, David. Appreciate you asking.
Thanks, Hugh. And then I also want to recognize Jennifer Carpenter, who was part of the working group. And Jennifer, you got your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in too and echo Jackie's sentiment and the rest of the exec committee on Lori and the team's hard work. I joined in on some meetings, and then life took me, in other directions, and I had a lot less time to contribute. And I just want to say that they worked so hard, and it was really a team effort and a group effort, and thought about things really comprehensively, and just bravo to Lori and the rest of the group for this. And then building on what Lori has been saying about communities and providing the support for them. In addition to that, I feel like this is a great opportunity for IGBC to get out there more and demonstrate our interest and investment in conflict reduction for grizzly bears out in the communities. I think that, again, as others have said, it's a great way to highlight partnerships between state and federal agencies and the communities. And, and this last point, which may or may not be a selling point, it depends on the community perhaps, but having the IGBC logo and that you are certified Bear Smart through IGBC has some cachet for some communities that can help motivate marketing aspects and maybe tourism or some sort of financial benefit from an economic perspective relative to visitation to the area, something to that effect. So, and then I guess lastly, is that I feel like as IGBC, from my perspective, I feel like we need to make an investment in this. And I think having it on the website is a great step, but I don't think it's enough. I know the money part is very, very challenging. I know the budget. I know it's not very strong, and these are tough, lean times for agencies in putting this funding together, but maybe we can scrape something and get a coordinator position and try it out and see where we go with it. I think in order for it to be successful, I personally think it needs a coordinator. And maybe it's a collateral job with some other job, or maybe it's, I don't know how quite it looks, but
we had a lot of conversation in the working group about workload and how do we launch this to be successful. And really, to me, the coordinator is the way to go, but it is, I think it's about a $70,000 or $80,000 investment. So that's not small money. Anyway, that's just sort of my initial 2 cents on the matter. I really support this. I know the Park Service supports it. You know, we've seen it work in other communities, and Jackson, I know, is getting up to speed, and maybe they're not, I don't know if they're going to go for the Bear Smart certification or Bear Wise or which way they're going. David may know more than I do. But it's making a difference, and times are changing, and you know, as evidenced by this awful fatality that we had last year, we need to educate communities about how to coexist with carnivores. Thanks.
Thanks, Jennifer. I see Hugh.
Yeah, thank you. And I appreciate, Jennifer, your comments there. They're all really good points. And I guess it kind of goes to a question that was in my mind. It kind of comes back to a comment that was made earlier about a lot of groups sort of operating in this space. The question in my mind, if it is not the IGBC that helps to take the lead on this, is there any other organization that is in the wings in position to be able to help lead this effort? And I see shaking heads there, and that was my assumption, but I think it's an important question for us to ask.
I mean, in the talks that I've had, nobody's said that they, you know, well, if you can't do it, we'll do it. So, not that I know of.
Well, and I'll just offer Hugh in a different way. There's not one other group, but there's dozens and dozens. You know, people doing work in all kinds of places, and the opportunity here for an umbrella is there. I want to recognize Michael Burwash from British Columbia. Michael.
Yeah, thanks. Just building off Jennifer's comments, and the success of the Wild Safe program in British Columbia was really based on having that coordinator role and Mike Badry in that role. And then part of that last question about delivery and the success we've had is having a sort of a nonprofit coordinating agency, and that they're sort of the ones that can help not only leverage other funding as well, but they play that coordinating role, and the coordinator works closely with that group. And the other advantage to having that coordination is we get all the statistics and metrics, right, from all those communities that are participating, and it allows you to have those really interesting roll-ups of where you're having success, and it probably can point to where you might want to direct some funding for potentially research or other things. Anyway, just some comments.
Thank you. Chris.
Yeah, just echo a lot of the same things. Great presentation, great work. But curious, was there any looking at, are there any NGOs out there that rather than hiring a coordinator that you could transfer, like if there was money you could transfer and give to an NGO, and they're the ones that hire, supervise, and kind of lead rather than someone internally?
I mean, yeah, I don't know. I mean,
So, I mean, do you want to go to nuts and bolts? I mean,
I'm just kind of curious in that option 3.
I guess the only thing that I would say is it would have to be one that extends the full extent. You know, talking with Idaho, they're interested in participating and having their Bearwise coordinator also talk with if we do run a IGBC program coordinator, because some of their communities, if there's funding available, they may want to. But, you know, if we did it that way, you would have to have someone that kind of does they cover the full grizzly bear range, right? Because programs going to go from Cascades to Yellowstone.
So I can come back on the nuts and bolts, but Jackie, you have a question.
Well, so Rick, I'm kind of curious on, so we have the program in Wyoming, of course, I'm familiar with it. How would you look at this as, would it add something in? Do you feel like you don't need it? Have you guys got it all handled? Is it complementary? So I'm really curious because we're one of those places in Wyoming that have something kind of already cooking.
Yeah, so first off, the work the team did was great work. The materials put together are just fantastic, great stuff. I think in Wyoming, what I see is the work that's been done can be complementary to what we do. But I think the key word here is community. And in Wyoming, we have so many communities that have bear issues, and we have more and more communities each year. And I think it's really important that they look to a single agency like ours for help with their community bear issues. And so my only thought, or I'll throw this out for consideration, is that, it's from Cokeville, Wyoming, which is where we have grizzly bears, to here is something like 700 miles, and we saw the map. There are a lot of communities with grizzly bears right now, and so I don't think a single IGBC person should be a go-to for all those communities. You really got to have the local level interest and contact in person. And so for Wyoming, that's a person within Wyoming Game and Fish that they can go to. Now, our folks on the ground can work with communities, but if they have the option and ability to draw upon the great work that IGBC is doing and utilize some of those materials, that's where I see the benefit for us. So very supportive of the program. It's fantastic work. But at the end of the day for Wyoming, we've got to be the local red shirts in the communities that folks can go to work with to keep these programs.
But it could be helpful and complementary.
Helpful and complementary.
And that's a great point. I think that the one big thing, as Hillary and I were kind of talking this on the way down, is that this coordinator of this program would get to know a lot of those on the ground people, because they need to be there with the community and make sure that the community is still letting their conflict specialist respond to those conflicts, know about the conflicts. This person isn't going to take that, position at all. They would be more just assisting the committee that the community has put together with anything that they need. Oh, you're in Ponderay, Idaho. Here's a list of potential, county regulations or state regulations that are already in place, and so they could hand them those. Here's your local bear representative that, you can get some information from, here's the Forest Service to get, I think it would just be, they would help the community connect if they don't already know who to go to, make that connection.
But, well, the only thing I kind of counter to that a little bit is just that, for that one IGBC person to be a go-to for all these tons of communities, I think would be next to impossible. And so I think if the agencies have the local folks on the ground that communities can go to,
right,
and then the local agency folks can draw upon the expertise and the materials and everything that's being built by IGBC, that to me is a better model.
Well, and it seems like if you have a state coordinator though, right? One person. So to me, that state coordinator would really be that person in line with, if there was another body, that they would be the real connection. And then your person could work with those individuals within the state.
Right. There really has to be that strong community tie to a face, to a person, because the interactions are so critical. And so the work at IGBC can support our folks that are at the community. That's the way I envision it.
And Lori, in the document, one of the parts of it is finding a consultant, right? So that could be the bear specialist?
No,
or-
we kind of actually thought about the consultant being more of a person to help them, like maybe a wildlife person, to kind of make it, science related or basic. Yeah, the fish and game person or the state or the bear specialist should be on the committee. We didn't necessarily want them to be the consultant. We didn't want them to have to write the documents or be the main go-to person, because we don't want to put more work on their plate. We just talked about finding a consultant so that they can have help. So like Kim Johnston was the consultant for Virginia City and people in Carnivores. And she really, helped talk them through each step and what they should do and how to assess and how to make.
Are we good on time on this? I think this is pretty important.
Yeah.
The details I think are important here. So to to Chris's question, Chris probably still has PTSD from when we hired you, David, going through the federal hiring process. So, would this person be a federal employee, a Forest Service employee, or have we not kind of sorted that out yet? Because I just envision like, what happens if there's a government shutdown right there in the middle of a critical time when we're dealing with conflicts and that person's not working or something? Stuff we used to never worry too much about, but do now.
Okay, so to pick up on the nuts and bolts and sort of the range of options that Rick was alluding there too. I mean, one option here is no further action, thanks to the materials, we're not going to endorse this as an IGBC, concept. The other is that we accept those materials, we finalize those, we post them on the website. We encourage people to find them and make use of them and contact their, local bear specialist or local wildlife agency if they want to start to work those things.
That's option 2.
Yep. And then a third option, and there's some flavors to this one, is some further support from the IGBC from a staffing perspective. And I will just note that to get this far, we put about a third of an FTE into a contract with a contractor who helped prepare that manual, that we have now in draft form, Andrea Morehouse. And so that I can maintain, I think, remember that in our IGBC budget, we have contributions from the interior agencies, the Forest Service, and it's about $93,000 a year, and about $23,000 of that was used in this fiscal year for getting us to the point where you now have this draft program in front of you. So we could carry that forward going forward, and that would get something in terms of a consultant or contractor, and we could obviously do better if we had additional contributions to that. And we have a analog. This really is unprecedented for IGBC. I mean, you're doing something potentially that's very different than the past. So the only other thing that the IGBC has that's similar is the bear resistant container program. And that program, we use the support and also the funds that come in from the companies that are asking for testing to support staff support that helps that run. And so and we do that through a cooperative agreement with the Wildlife Management Institute, which could potentially be that nonprofit partner, Chris. They have the ability to accept and to work with funds from the outside. And we know from some initial conversations that there are people interested in putting together a fund or seeding for a fund that could help communities once they start going down this path. And that could be something that a centralized person could do, Rick, is helping play matchmaker. Obviously not getting in the line between the wildlife agency and the community, but here's some additional things from outside that worldview. So the simplest thing is to build on what we currently have, which is this agreement with the Wildlife Management Institute. But by no means is that the only thing we might do. There are lots of ways that this could be structured if that's the decision that the group makes, that you want to go down, you want to look for support in a permanent way.
So would that entail a dues increase, or do we have the money in our budget now?
So what I just so we put 23,000 into this year, and we could maintain that pretty much indefinitely. We could add to that if we were going to reduce. We currently have 4,000 going to the information education outreach awards to communities, and so right now that's in small dollar commitments to to specific communities on IEO. So again, that's all you have in terms of turning the dial with the existing federal dollars that are in IGBC. And so I guess I look to the room about you can obviously you could put all of it into this or some of it into this, or you might look for other options here.
Well, and I also, not to dominate this, but I also think about the conversation we had about the bear resistant container program, and I think we've been struggling. Toby spent a ton of time trying to figure out how we not only make that program self-sustaining, but that it actually becomes an income generator. And I think about the disparity, the economic disparity the communities that are dealing with their conflicts, right? Like Jackson could afford this easy, right? Other communities, this would be a big stretch for them, I would think, to be able to afford this. And some, to Jennifer's point, if this becomes, if some certification from the IGBC or some other entity becomes something that communities are promoting and say, come recreate here because we have our act together, so to speak, should there be some way to generate income from that? So it's not only self-sustaining, but that it potentially generates funds that we can give grants to communities that frankly probably can't afford to do it with their existing tax base. So I think there's lots of, like, I'm all for someone doing this, but I do still feel like there's some devil in the details. And also to Rick's point, the last thing we want to do is further complicate the people who are on the ground trying to deal with these conflicts. And then it would seem, and then so they're not here, so communities aren't hearing multiple messages and trying to distinguish which path they should go down. But anyway, I still think there might be some fine tuning to do, but I really like the idea of someone owning this, not just putting it up on a website. And we all know what happens there, right? We all have websites that have stuff on it that is so dated, it's laughable. And that would be worse, frankly, than doing nothing in my mind.
So just a quick point of order is that we're not moving to conclusion or decision this afternoon. But we are going to be coming back to this on Friday morning. And so hopefully there can be some additional conversation and we can think through, this question of recognition, whether we call it certification or, a process where, whether it's the local program comes and says, here's the checklist, do we get the seal? That recognition question, and then this question of support, and then some of the details of how that might work. So I'm going to put those on the table, but I do want to recognize, Ruth, did you have a comment? BLM?
Yeah, well, I just had a question, really. I put it in the chat too. I know there's 3 options listed, but is there also an option of like the certification route, the website route, and then reevaluating the demand from the communities after, say, a year? Instead of jumping right to funding a program director, because I assume, this is going to be a communities volunteering to enter this program. So instead of jumping right to a program director and spending up to $80,000, starting the program via the website and seeing what kind of demand might result from the program as another option.
Well, that would still be option kind of 2.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. And that's certainly, I mean, again, the continuing in FY23, sort of as we did in FY22, where we used a portion of the federal IGBC dollars for a contractor supporting Bear Smart communities. We could do that again next year at that level, without asking for new contributions. And this hang out the shingle and see, what kind of foot traffic we get in the new store, right?
Yeah, I would just be really concerned with who's going to answer all the questions. I don't have the capacity in my job my real job, to then take on a lot of questions and that might come with that. So, and I'm sure David does too. So.
Yeah. So what I want people to think about this and get all the issues on the table. And so we did hear from Rick, and maybe Ed and Gary, I wonder what the other 2 states are thinking as you look at this, and Hannah as well. I'm sorry. In terms of that question of complementary versus, potentially confusing.
So value, no value, partial value. Idaho.
Well, I wonder how similar or different this is from AFWA has, the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies has implemented a national program. I get it. It's an informational, it's on a website. You go there to learn how to be Bear Smart. So I'll probably ramble here for a minute. We certainly manage of bear-human interaction well beyond nationally, in a national scope, and certainly in Idaho, manage bear-human interactions well beyond the range, even the imagined range of grizzly bears in Idaho. Bear-human conflict management is a big deal. So for us, the program has to be more than the IGBC seal of approval for your community, because I don't have grizzly bears in McCall, but I got a big black bear problem in McCall. So we work with McCall all the time, and it's going to be outside of the scope of this problem and this coordinator and these funds, and we're still going to be doing it, just like Rick described it, at the local level with our folks integrating into the community and working, whether it's through material similar to this or similar to the other bear safety programs that we have going on. So yeah, partially, but grizzly bear habitat is a small fraction, unlike Wyoming, it's a small fraction of our occupied bear habitat. So helpful, certainly. I mean, a focused message, grizzly bears are a different animal. They present a different risk. Conflict management, though, is two-stemmed, right? It's proactive and it's reactive. And this, to me, is the proactive side of conflict management. And you have time, right, in this proactive sense of a community who wants to be more proactive in the future in not experiencing these conflicts. This is the program that helps them. Sometimes it comes from a result of either one time or a history of reactive conflict management that is the motivator for that community to kind of get their stuff together and work more collaboratively in the community to make sure all the bases are covered instead of just some of them, because you only cover some of them and you still have bear problems. You have to be pretty comprehensive. So I'm still trying to figure out, is the juice worth the squeeze? You know, and then I think about, okay, so we've got, let's just say we take the lead and we get a coordinator who's running this program mostly in grizzly bear range, because it's an IGBC certification, which has its own concerns for me, right? I can see people who come from who knows where, oh, this is an IGBC certified community, I will be safe here. It's not a guarantee of safety. It's not. So you know, I worry just a little bit about the gold level IGB certification of Bear Smart. That means I won't encounter, you know, a close encounter or anything like that. So there's a little concern on that. But if we go in here, and then this gets back to a much larger esoterical conversation for me about should bears be everywhere? And so you're going to have communities who want this, and they're a long ways from bears, but they still want this because it's cool, it's hip, and I want you to come to my town, and that's going to be a low priority based on there's 50 places where we might want to be working, but maybe some of those aren't the ones that are coming forward and other ones are, and then we've got to sort this thing out. So we can figure that out. I certainly see the need for it, and I think that the team has done a lot of thoughtful preparation into this. But how to do it is still a bit of a hurdle.
That's Gary. Any thoughts on the Montana side?
Yeah, I think first of all, compliments to the group that put this together. Integrating a lot of thought and issues that we're all addressing, having to address. And I guess I'm on kind of what Rick and Wyoming is doing and trying to incorporate that into what Montana's trying to do, and the diversity of different programs, different people on the ground, working with the communities and the larger components that we're having to deal with related to conflict. Communities are one component of this. And based on my experience and what I see in the NCDE efforts, there is a much bigger component that is out there related to those non-community areas, agricultural communities, those new residents that are coming in and wanting to be outside the community, living remotely, and how to incorporate this into everything that we're already doing on the ground and make it a tool that's effective. It is another tool. That's the one thing I would add. It is another tool that can reach a different group that we may not be reaching because of biases towards the agency, other things, and let the communities make that decision. But I look at it from the standpoint of it's just another tool. How to incorporate that and implement it on the ground and be complementary or be additive to what we're doing already without diluting the messages that are out there. That'd be the kind of the thought I have. I haven't talked to Ken or some of our other agency leaders as to how this would incorporate into what we're doing and whether or not we take a lead in that at the state level. Those are some of the questions I would have.
Oh, Hannah, any thoughts from Washington State?
Yeah, thanks. Really interesting discussion. So certainly, of course, black bears, wide-ranging and issue for state management. And I think as long as we can be complementary, so I echo some of the same things my colleagues have been saying, complementary and aligning with existing efforts like the Bearwise, the AFWA Bearwise, and there's also, some local community pieces happening all over the place that aren't necessarily associated with the Bearwise or anything affiliated. As long as we can align those, amplify those messages, I think it's a good opportunity to do just that. And it's an opportunity for IGBC to demonstrate action on this issue. I think that's really valuable. The things we've heard and we know, right? More bears, more people. There's going to be more interactions, and there's a great need. So I don't see a problem with expanding capacity focused on that need. I also agree with what some folks were saying earlier about somebody needs to own it to advance something, that the passive pieces often are not as successful without a coordinator and owner to facilitate action. So I support that piece, and I share the concern about certified, and I will have more conversation here, but I think that's a word that we should consider very carefully and perhaps not use, maybe approved or guided by or something to that effect, so that we don't sort of create that sense of it's certified, therefore I won't interact with a grizzly bear. Those are my thoughts.
Good thoughts, Hannah.
Hillary.
And so what is the response been like from communities? I think I've heard you say there are some communities that have expressed interest. And what do we have on the book so far? And then who's asked?
Well, right after we brought it up the first time, Bozeman called, and we were like, oh, that might be a little big. But, so, yeah, Bozeman, Missoula, Whitefish, and then I know we have some bear specialists in the areas that already have communities that they would like to approach in their mind.
you know, I mean, I don't wanna call out and say that they're gonna do it, just, but, you know, like the city of Whitefish is mostly black bears, and they actually did put together, they are putting together a garbage ordinance and things like that, but, they are, I do have visitors that wander through, and it's, and they have a lot of residents, summer and winter, that come and go, and, so yeah, and then, just smaller communities, but I think the bear specialists, especially in Montana, just because I work with the NCD specialists, so we've talked with them and, more Montana specialists consider the community. Yeah, I can't really remember. Yeah. And then there's also nonprofit groups that have been interested in looking at it. I know there's a group down in the Bitterroot, and we have a new specialist down in the Bitterroot. And defenders and there's the usual people that support their work across the areas. Taking a look at it or want to look at it and get their. And we have ranch communities, Rango, Colorado, Paul. So you can follow it, but that might be a little far.
We don't have grizzlies there.
No, we don't have grizzlies. Anyway.
Put a ballot initiative on. Choose ballot.
Yeah, we're taking everything else, why not?
So I'm gonna, Chair, I'll bite on Hogan's remark, just for a minute. And I want to be careful. We go back 1975 or the 1993 recovery plan or whatever it is we go to, and we sit around this table and we talk about recovering and delisting and managing bears. And there's a plan, there's a strategy. We've been working toward it. We've got primary conservation areas, we got demographic monitoring areas, we've got bear range that's expanding beyond what has been defined as suitable habitat into unsuitable habitat. We've got conflicts on the rise. We have no clear path forward to delisting recovered, biologically recovered populations and increases in range and conflict and human safety. And there is a part of me that is concerned about a program being run under the guise of you can have bears anywhere and everywhere as long as people are smart about it. I don't agree. I think that's a mistake. You can't have bears everywhere, right? You can't. There are places where they simply don't belong, and you can't. I can't, as a member of this executive committee, get behind a program that someone turns into, you can have bears anywhere as long as people are smart about it. There is a definite need for bear awareness and bear smarts in places where we have agreed that grizzly bears have a place in these ecosystems. But I'm sorry, I can't get behind it. You can have bears anywhere as long as people are smart about it. So I'm a little cautious about developing a really good message that gets hijacked into something different. There's a place for bears to live, and there is a place not for bears to live. And I have to stay focused on that.
Can I ask a question? So and this is for the states, especially Montana, Idaho, and Wyoming. But as we think about it, our goal, we do have a goal to delist, and that's the ultimate, right? The species recovery delist. And so, and I don't have this clear in my head, but it seems like, and I don't disagree with you, Ed. We wouldn't want this hijacked, and hopefully we'd have something like that. But seems like there's some value when we go into, if we get delisted, we can delist, in one or some of these areas not having conflicts and not having fatalities and not having bad human bear encounters. Because every bear, if you have a bad encounter, we take the bear out, and then that impacts, the numbers thing that we all manage and follow. So I have an answer, but in my head, there's some positive of if you can do what you can to reduce those conflicts and the bad outcome, that we all win in the big picture of trying to get the delisting. I mean, that's in my head. I don't have it clear, but it seems like there's some value or it's something we almost would have to do to not, if we're really trying to manage to that point. I mean, but I don't know. I mean, I'm asking the states, it's in my head that has some positive.
Well, and so it's a important exchange, and I want to come back to it. I'm going to check the time right now and suggest.
There is a good time to come back.
Yeah, so there is a design to the agenda here for the next few days. So what I want to do is I want to take the scheduled break. I want to reconvene at 3:15 Pacific, 4:15 Mountain. And we will have an opportunity, we've delved right into some big important business. Want to reconvene the group with agency updates, things that your colleagues need to know about things that you're working on. And then we will look at our larger strategic set of questions with an eye towards tomorrow. We're going out to look in concrete ways, and meet some folks from communities and see some places on the ground here in Idaho. And then Friday morning, we're back in this session, and it's executive time. It's your time, and so you've got this decision about the Bear Smart Communities program. And you've got some other decisions about direction of the executive committee and direction to the subcommittees for the winter meeting and their 5-year plans. So that's where we're coming back to this afternoon. 15 minutes, and then we'll do the updates.
You'll keep that up then.
Okay, folks, we're going to reconvene. If the members of the executive committee that are joining remotely could turn their cameras back on so we can feel that community. Appreciate that. See you there. And because the next thing on the agenda here is our agency updates. We had some questions about the field visit tomorrow, which we will get to here in a moment. But I wanted to turn to that agency update piece. And let's see. Sorry, I should have this.
I have it pulled up, but if I remember correctly, you're at.
And how does it work? And so we're going to go in the order that it's, oops, not that one, the next one.
Is this the one you want?
Yeah, the next slide.
Okay.
There we go. So I had asked in an email prior to the meeting for folks to send me key items that other colleagues, other agencies need to know about things happening in your jurisdiction. And we're going to get one of these. These will be brief, but from each agency, and that way we have that sense of that 360 of what's happening around the region before we then have our strategic discussion here this afternoon and Friday morning. So we'll start with the Fish and Wildlife Service, and I think it's Matt and Hillary.
Thanks, David. Yeah, we just have 3 updates. First, on the delisting petition status, I should have put petitions plural because we have 3 petitions that we are considering. Yes, we're still considering them. We have not made any decisions yet. We've got a petition from Wyoming to delist the Yellowstone ecosystem, a petition from Montana to delist NCDE, and a petition from Idaho to delist the lower 48 states. Yeah, but it's been having a lot of discussions. It's not a small task to address 3 different petitions. They all interrelate and affect each other. And Idaho petition is particularly complicated, asking us to delist bears in the lower 48 states. And so that's where we are. We're still considering them. So I don't have any change in the status of where they are. We're just considering them right now. Second update. We're standing up a grizzly bear conflict program within the recovery program. And that's no small effort either. We have hired 5 different people. The last one just started 2 days ago in Wyoming. So we have a conflict coordinator, and
He just stepped out. He's on the phone.
okay,
Yeah,
probably taking a
You guys
guys
coordinating.
Yeah, we hired Ben Jimenez as the conflict coordinator. He will be taking conflict calls and supervising 4 bear specialists that we have distributed in Montana and Wyoming, and we have a rover that could go into Idaho when he's up to speed or wherever is needed. The Montana people will be primarily handling relocations. The state there is a new state law in Montana that limits their ability to relocate bears. So we'll be doing that. We'll be helping Idaho Fish and Game with issues in Jackson. There's some celebrity bears, some roadside bears that have been particularly time consuming. And so we'll be doing that. And then, I think we'll be spending a lot of time doing education and conflict prevention. Everything we're talking about, but the need is huge. And Ben just walked in the room. So Ben, I just wanted to say, everybody, this has been our new conflict coordinator. And yeah, he'll be with us next couple days if you have any questions for him. And that's all I had for conflict staff.
Yeah, just to add to, so just want to give kudos to Hillary, hiring 5 new positions that frankly we didn't have, and navigating through the federal HR process and getting them in place close to the beginning of the conflict season. Took a lot of effort by them, so thanks for all that effort. And then welcome. Some of you may remember Mike Jimenez, who's Ben's dad, who used to be our wolf recovery coordinator. I told Ben he's a younger, better looking version of his dad. So, smart. Smart, yeah. I don't know, you came to work for the Fish and Wildlife Service, so that might be. But, yeah, we're delighted to have Ben. And then just a couple other personnel changes. Folks know I officially became the regional director in March. I've been acting since July when they're hired. I just announced Anna Munoz as the new deputy regional director. She was the external affairs assistant regional director. Been about 5 or 6 years. She's been acting deputy since I was acting. And then we also, with Jody's departure, going from the Montana ES field office to Region 1. We just announced, or soon, I guess he's soon to start, maybe starting this week, Adam Zarender as the new Montana ES field office project leader. Adam comes to us from, he was the project leader for the Fish and Wildlife Service in Austin. So, did a lot of that work in Texas, so has a lot of experience working with the state agency and with diverse partners in the state of Texas on tough ES issues. So we were delighted to get him in Montana. And now flip it over to you to give a couple updates on things going on, personnel changes in Region 1.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Just a couple things I'll note. One is our long-serving regional director, Robin Thorson, retired, excuse me, at the end of April. And so we are currently in the process of backfilling that role. I'm acting in that role as regional director at the moment, but the advertisement is out on the street currently for our regional director position closes towards the end of July. So hopefully in the next couple months, be able to share with you all who our permanent regional director is coming in to backfill behind Robin Thorson. And then in addition, Chris Swanson, who was our project leader for the Idaho Fish and Wildlife Office there based out of Boise, has taken another position for the Fish and Wildlife Service down in the Southeast. We will greatly miss Chris and Robin as well. And we're working to get the announcement out to backfill behind Chris. And in the meantime, we've got Sandy Fisher, who is on the phone here, acting as our Idaho Fish and Wildlife Service project leader. Thank you very much, Sandy, for stepping into that role while we work to backfill behind Chris. So some important transitions for us in Region 1 of the Fish and Wildlife Service, particularly within the grizzly bear realm. So that's I'll leave it at that. Thanks, Matt.
There's some concerns about hearing around the rooms.
Okay, thanks, Hugh. So next, I'll look to Rick, Wyoming Game and Fish.
Yeah, sure. So I'll just give a couple of personnel updates.
And if you could speak, we have some notes on the phone that I guess on the sides in particular, it's hard to hear. So.
I'm staring at a creepy eye, Al. Just a few personnel updates. Our large carnivore section, which is headed by Dan Thompson and handles our large carnivore work, state has had quite a few changes in the past 12 months. So we have some new names. You may not know the faces yet, but Kyle Garrett is our new Bearwise coordinator. Got Clint Atkinson, our new specialist in Pinedale. We finished up, working on finishing his master's from UC Berkeley. Also, actually, kind of a follow-on livestock depredation. And Dan Bjornley, give you news, Dan. Great, kind of contributing. Also, fantastic for Alaska to find a new event. So we have one job still. New names and faces there. Just in terms of quick updates, mentioned we're initiating some new research after Green to look at livestock depredations. We're trying to get a better handle on yearly livestock loss out there. We have a method that we use for any damage losses to livestock for calves, but yearly livestock is a little bit contentious, so we're there. We continue to do our large-scale monitoring program, so capture and our crew, Brian Gold in particular, Nathan O'Brien, who's our large carnivore section for a long. He just recently conducted some interagency PAT training, we call it predator attack team training. PAT training. Just wrapped that up. It was very well received and conflicts rapidly. So that.
Thanks, Rick. Ed, Idaho Fish and Game.
Thanks, David. I start off with human bear conflicts. Been busy for us this year, busier than most. We've enjoyed a couple of off years, especially down in GYE. Jeremy Nicholson is our bear specialist down there, and Jeremy's really done a commendable job helping manage proactive and reactive conflict. But this year, just kind of got away from us, and we had to remove 5 grizzly bears, 1 cell with 1 yearling and 1 cell with 2 yearlings out of the greater Yellowstone population. Unfortunate incidents. They were known bears with known histories. We also had 1 young male grizzly killed in misidentification in a black bear hunt out of the Yellowstone population. And we had a bear killed during a defensive charge on a couple of hunters up in the Panhandle region this spring. That was determined to be self-defense. Then you'll see tomorrow the country that we're managing in up here. There's a busy conflict here so far in the Kootenai Valley. That's the less than 10 mile upper area that's located between the Selkirk and Akasneyak ecosystem. Goats, llamas, pigs, sheep, there's been a potpourri, throw some chickens on top. Just about everything up here keeping us busy. We do have hired Rob Morris, a retired conservation officer, to fill our grizzly bear conflict previous vacancy that we had up here in the Panhandle area. And I would say that we recognized Jeremy Nicholson. I talked about him just briefly a minute ago. Our bear specialist in Yellowstone received the department's Employee of the Year award for senior management, recognizing his great work. Unfortunately, he was unable to be there to receive his award because he was putting grizzly bears down on very unfortunate. The other thing that that's going on in lawsuit in Idaho and elsewhere, multiple lawsuits brought by advocacy groups seeking to curtail hunting, trapping, and forest management activities related to grizzly bears, including significant portions of Idaho outside of occupied, non-occupied areas for grizzly bears. This isn't helpful to cultivate community support for the expansion of grizzly bear range if grizzly bears are repeatedly used in court battles against local community interests on federal lands. We've got a suit against the commission, myself, and the governor seeking to end wolf trapping in 4 of Idaho's 7 regions, much of which is not occupied grizzly bear habitat, but the suit is brought on a risk of incidental take to grizzly bears by wolf trapping. Suit seeking to end baiting of black bears on federal land outside of occupied grizzly bear recovery areas where the commission has prohibited baiting, and a suit seeking to force action on the Selway Bitterroot NJ rule. He's my lawyer, busy behind me. On the science front, Idaho has a very comprehensive camera deployment system that we use to estimate wolf population statewide, and that camera grid, randomly placed camera grid of 600 some cameras that take pictures both on motion detection and then all at the same time simultaneously to give a view shed of Idaho, if you will. Provides us tremendous information, not just on wolves, but many other forest carnivores and bears and grizzly bears. And it helps us more to know that they're not there as much as it would to help us know that they are there. Jeremy continues his capture and mark work with grizzly bears in Idaho's portion of the Yellowstone ecosystem. I think Jeremy has, in the last couple of years, got his hands on more previously unknown bears than we ever thought we would be able to. We documented a grizzly bear outside of North Fork, near Salmon, Idaho, in 21A, about a mile and a half into Idaho from Montana. Whereabouts of that bear are unknown at this time. Those bears, the bear that we saw outside of Grangeville 2 years ago, no additional sign of that bear, thinking that it wandered its way back from where it came from. We have a little concern that we're working through with our partners at the Fish and Wildlife Service with what looks to us to be a divergence of service and state priorities for grizzly bears in occupied versus unoccupied areas. We had a meeting to talk about better coordination of science between service and the state in Idaho. Um, and probably a follow-up meeting, I think, is being scheduled, but just see if we can't get on the same page about making sure the work that we think that we've committed to in recovery plans and work plans gets prioritized for places where we have bears and work that needs to be done before we start doing more work in unoccupied areas. And I'll leave it at that.
Thanks very much, Ed. Gary, Montana.
That's all I'm gonna do as best I can since I didn't get catch notes.
That's okay.
It's
High level.
High level stuff. It's on, couple things, occurred this last legislative session, where the state passed a law that fish mullet parks no longer, transport and release bears that are outside the recovery area. And put the emphasis on U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Yeah, we still respond to the conflict. We can still do all the work on the ground, but as soon as we have our hands on that bear or those bears, we can no longer transport them and release them in our normal root sites. So Hillary got, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service got put in place that they had to hire people pretty quickly, and they did so. And so luckily, we've only had one bear that we've actually had to do that with. The legislature and the governor are very, I guess, wanting to see delisting happen and that the state take control and manage grizzly bears to meet the needs across all ecosystems. With the expansion of grizzly bears into habitats that we now would look at as not grizzly bear habitat, the concern for conflicts and not only human but other conflicts has put the governor's office and legislatures on a track to reduce fish mullet parks' efforts in those areas, other than to respond to conflicts, and that's where that law came from. On the other legislative side, they approved a bear chase season, black bear chase season with dogs, which was to be acted upon by our commission, and was to be basically statewide. But as we went through that and assessed where that could happen safely, it became apparent that most of the area where black bears are also are occupied with grizzly bears. So that shrank down to a very limited area in central Montana. The rest of the state was precluded from that. That it would be not only prudent to preclude those areas because of the conflicts with bear hunters, misidentification, and the safety issues between grizzly bears and humans, but they made the decision to make that only in the basically in the central part of the state. The distribution of grizzly bears has expanded dramatically in all areas associated with the Yellowstone ecosystem as well as the NCDE. Bears are now showing up in central Montana, and our message now is that anything from Billings west is considered potential grizzly bear presence. Lewistown has had several bear sightings there. We had a new one just south of Lewistown last year. We have sightings of bears just north of Lewistown right now that have been reoccurring in the Missouri River breaks, and we are continually getting reports of those. So with that, Fish, Wildlife and Parks is trying to react to those sightings as well as confirm sightings as they expand in locations, not only on the east side, but on the Bitterroot side and the west side, Kalispell location, etc. Another thing, the commission commission now has to approve any release sites that are captured and going to be released. The commission has done that. Those are the traditional sites that we have. It was very directed that the governor did not want to see, or legislature did not want to see additional sites developed. So all these bears that are being captured are going to sites that we have been historically putting bears into. And the concern by the agency is that we continue to put more bears in places, and too many bears in the same places where we're getting the concentration of grizzly bears in certain areas. But with the commission only approving that many of the historic areas, that may continue, and have to look at some other options. Outreach and education, Fish Wild Parks have put an observant effort into that, continues to add to that because of the conflicts and the communities that are not ready for grizzly bears and their presence in those communities now. We're trying to get ahead of that. It can be very difficult for us to keep ahead of the distribution of these and the expansion of their presence. We're trying to keep that both on the south edge and the east edge of the NCDE, as well as the east edge of the Yellowstone ecosystem. I think I'm going to close it out there.
Great.
If Ken wants to add something tomorrow, he can.
Great.
Report, you did good.
Thank you, Gary. And next up is Washington State.
Good afternoon, Hannah here. Just quickly, we're continuing our outreach efforts in the Selkirks. So moved back to in-person events and bear spray demos and handing out bear spray in that area. We're also supporting U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services monitoring efforts in the Selkirks. So putting out hare corrals, and we're now there are several collared bears in Washington, and we're learning some great things from that, or some new things, including also got a picture of a bear outside the recovery zone there in the Selkirks. We had, excitement. A dead grizzly bear showed up on a beach, a Salish Sea beach, just near the Canadian border. That's what that little point in the map is there. We did collect samples, sent those off to U.S. Fish for analysis. There was no obvious sign of death on the bear. It was pretty well decomposed. And so there's, we don't know, but considering that could have just floated from recent floods or maybe out swimming. So we don't know where it came from exactly, but assume from the north. And then just a little, this is the piece that's fits with the conversation we had earlier. So that should say the AFWA Bearwise, but engaged in community engagement through the Bearwise, as well as some local community programs around black bear, living with black bears. And then also we've been doing over the past year some black bear monitoring, hare snare corrals, and so sort of inadvertent grizzly bear monitoring in that space, covering largely Western Washington. That's it.
Thank you, Hannah. So next up is British Columbia. Michael.
Hi, thanks. I'll try and be brief. I've got 4 items I wouldn't mind covering. Grizzly bear threat assessment, our provincial stewardship framework, North Cascades recovery effort, and Bear Smart community program. Can I share my screen just briefly?
You should be able to. Yeah, you should be able to.
Let me know if you see that.
We got it.
Okay, so this is the threat assessment that was done at a provincial scale. And I'll just zoom into the area of interest since I wish I was down there with everybody. You can see the threat classification tab. And if we zoom in on the area of interest, South Selkirk, South Purcell's high, and Yak very high. So these were done at a provincial scale. So the South Selkirk's, Yak, and the South Purcell units have ongoing research and monitoring, as well as long-term efforts to reduce attractants in those areas, and quite a few access closures also in these units, as well as land acquisition and habitat management projects that have been done specifically for the protection of bears. So the actual threat level is lower than this provincial scale one. So that's sort of our first point we wanted to raise, because this exercise was done at that provincial scale. That's just relevant to where you guys are going to be heading out and talking about these units. The second piece I wouldn't mind updating on is the provincial grizzly bear stewardship framework that we're working on. I think I raised that at our last meeting. And so the draft has been developed in collaboration with the federal government and over 85 Indigenous nations who participated. This includes a separate draft on a provincial commercial bear viewing strategy as well. So there's the two documents, and both of these documents, both in draft form, represent a blend of Western science and Indigenous knowledge. So the grizzly bear stewardship framework that was prepared for grizzly bears in Western Canada are designated federally as a species of concern. The framework is set with an overarching objective to ensure grizzly bears don't become threatened or endangered, and identifies a set of coordinated conservation activities, goals, and objectives, and land use measures appropriate for grizzly bear and ecosystem conservation. The framework doesn't seek to provide specific recommendations on site-specific bear challenges, but it summarizes the best available information on cumulative knowledge, Indigenous and scientific, biology and threats, and provides broad advice for grizzly bear stewardship at a provincial, territorial, and regional level. The commercial bear viewing strategy provides recommendations to minimize the impacts of viewing activities on bears and maximize the safety of people viewing bears, since that's a growing industry, and I'm sure Washington is experiencing that too, maybe, for black bears. The bear viewing strategy provides advice, recommendations, and guidance to agencies regulating and managing bear viewing, and it's informed by and supports the framework. So the next step is to share those two draft documents with stakeholders and the public. That's this fall, and then formal consultation with First Nations, hoping to implement in early 2023. So once it's public, it'll be up and out there. North Cascades recovery efforts. We're working on a recovery plan for that area, doing field work to check habitat mapping, and supporting a wild safe coordinator in Manning. And then the last piece was just around the conversation we had around Wild Safe BC and the Bear Smart Community Program. So Wild Safe in British Columbia delivers the education portion of our human wildlife conflict program. And then Bear Smart is a status that the community can get that signifies it's met a number of criteria that should minimize long-term conflicts with bears in the community. So similar challenges to what we were just talking about in terms of resourcing and coordination. So interested in the conversation on that topic more on Friday. Sorry, that's my update. I tried to be brief.
No, thank you, Michael. That was, we're interested in what you're doing for sure. So.
It could, I don't know if your map is live. Oh, it's gone now. Never mind.
It was there.
It was there. So, okay, I don't think we have Alberta. Is Paul not? No, we don't have Paul today. So then if you could pull back up to the shared slide. Next up is the Forest Service.
All right, thanks, David. And I will also rely on my fellow Forest Service executives to fill in anything I may miss. So first item really want to highlight, I think for those that have been coming to these for a while, I think we can remember the time that Scott Jackson and Dan Venus took on an effort to try to get some consistency around food storage orders, both within the ecosystems as well as across ecosystems. And so over this last winter, we have made incredible strides to now have entire consistent food storage orders within the NCDE and within the DYD. There's still a little bit of differences between the two, but nothing like what it used to be. So if you remember the big chart that, yeah, like, I don't know, do you still have that, Scott, anywhere?
I think Dan does.
Dan does, yeah. I mean, it's like that size of table in the corner, the chart went from end to end. It's like a spreadsheet of all the, well, this one's kind of similar and it isn't. And so, really want to highlight that because that has taken a lot of effort. Really had our law enforcement help in that effort as well, because they're the ones that have to enforce those, and so that getting their input of what really is enforceable and what isn't was a huge lift. So we're really excited to say that. Like what's been mentioned, both with Hillary and Gary, we've been heavily involved in helping both agencies around the location sites within the northern region. We've had now with their expansion, especially Western Montana, especially on the Lolo and the Bitterroot National Forest that have very few relocation sites even identified from the old recovery plan. We've been able to work with the forest and the community to start establishing those. Got a great one now up at Lolo Pass. Lolo Pass, Lookout Pass, and Lost Trail Pass. But no, we've been heavily involved in that. And then, as Ed mentioned too, we have seen some increase in bear activity. The Bitterroot, the salmon shells, the bear that was caught on camera and on this. And then next slide. And like a lot of other folks, we've seen a lot of turnover, especially with our forest supervisors and line officers. And so Tricia O'Connor, who has been heavily engaged in IGBC, retired as and Chad Hudson has come in as the new forest supervisor on the Brittany Teton. Diane
Talia Farrow.
Thank you. Is now the new forest supervisor on the Shoshone. Lisa Himchick left the Shoshone and came to the Beaverhead Deer Lodge. Then Bill A.B. retired, and now Emily Platt is the new forest supervisor on the Helena Park. And then Kristen Bale, forest supervisor on the Okanagan and Wenatchee. She finished her 2-year term on the NCDE subcommittee chair, and as we heard earlier from Don Spector, is the new chair for that subcommittee. Thanks.
Thanks, Chris. We can stop the share for 1 second.
Chris, it's been a while since both Lori and the IGBC's visited. So you get Dan would show up at one of our meetings. Yeah. I think I see that him on the CPT. I don't know if that's him.
That is. Dan's here.
I think we're under the wire here. I know Jennifer Carpenter had a hard stop. Jennifer, are you still here? And can you give us a Park Service update?
I am still here, and I don't know if Don wants to give an update from his neck of the woods. As most of you know, Yellowstone had a catastrophic flood event, so 2 of our north entrance road washed out and our northeast entrance road is washed out, and we're heavy in emergency repairs and that, and looking at the long-term future, which will be very different for the next 10 years for the entire park. So we're pretty focused on that at this point, and have changed our visitation entry based on those conditions. Speaking specifically about Yellowstone, obviously, we have had an interesting occurrence, and it's probably, it happens every year, but maybe we're just seeing it this particular year. We've had an incredible season of bear viewing opportunities, roadside bears in the park that we've never seen before. We've had a number of interest-specific mortalities. 2 cubs of the year were killed by a male bear adjacent to the road in front of visitors and everything. It was kind of chaos. A sub-adult was killed in the same location, possibly by that same male bear, and an adult was killed as well. So it just indicates to us that there's a really high density of bears in the park there. Same thing for Tetons. Although knock on wood, we haven't seen any 399 incidents. She kicked out her 4 yearlings, so they're out and about and hopefully staying out of trouble. There was one suspected interest-specific killing of 3 cubs of the year on one bear, which we might even be the Togety Pass bear, which I hate to name it that, but it's bear 793, and Hillary and or Matt could maybe remember if that's that same bear or not. No human bear conflicts, knock on wood. I don't know if that will change, at least for Yellowstone, with the reduced visitation going on this summer. Nothing, no reports out of Glacier. Again, knock on wood there too. So those are the 3 park reports. I noticed, David, that there wasn't on the agenda an update from the subcommittees. I didn't want to necessarily report out on yes. We had a meeting last Friday on the conservation strategy, and I don't know if we're going to be talking about that or not, so I don't want to delve into that if that's a later agenda item. But that's all I've got for NPS, unless Dawn has anything to add.
Thanks, Jennifer. The subcommittees do their reports at the winter meetings as part of the regular business. But we do have but we do have the idea of guidance from the executives to the subcommittees. And of course, the conservation strategies are a key bit of business for the Yellowstone and the NCDE subcommittees. So yes, we will be coming back to that. So Don, anything from your region there of the Park Service?
Yeah, nothing official. I will tell you in my unofficial capacity, or in my official capacity, but as the new guy, I've been doing a lot of outreach and meet and greet and just see what stakeholder concerns are. And I get feedback almost everywhere I go about what's going on with grizzly bears in the North Cascades ecosystem. And it's sort of interesting because it's very different on the west side than it is on the east side, right? On the east side, it's like, this is dead and gone and we're not considering it anymore, and that's good. And on the east side, it's, hey, it's a new administration. Any interest in from the new administration and maybe kickstarting the project in concert with Fish and Wildlife and Forest Service and Department of Fish and Game Washington. So it is very interesting. I will tell you that one thing that I am not an expert on, but that seems to be a game changer that's changing the conversation on both sides of the pass, is the efforts that are underway with the First Nations and the provinces in Canada. And the way that that's changing the dialogue is people are recognizing now that if the folks north of the border are going to get more aggressive about reintroducing grizzly bears anywhere close to the border, all of a sudden that represents a monumental shift in sort of the status on this side of the country. In other words, it's probably not going to be the case if there's going to be grizzly bears, but when are there going to be grizzly bears, and what management remedies are we going to have to deal with that in this context? So in some cases, the conversation has shifted a little bit to people saying, hey, maybe we ought to proactively re-engage and try to encourage Fish and Wildlife to do a experimental population 10J regulation, just so that we have the maximum flexibility if this looks like something that's likely to happen anyway. And there also seems to just be increased, I think, demand for communities to engage in the conversation about how do we start making sure that we're getting ourselves, ready for bears. And that's in the face of having multiple black bear conflicts as we speak going on in our campgrounds up and down here. So topic is timely, and I think grizzly bears are definitely on people's mind in the park and in the western part of Washington state. So thank you.
Thanks, Don. Next up, Ruth Miller from BLM, and I think we have a slide.
Hello, we have a few updates from BLM. Of course, I mentioned at the start of the call that Mike Philbin retired. And then we are a couple months ago, right after Mike retired, I had a meeting with our other BLM states and we discussed the food storage order, and I mistakenly asked, what's so hard about a food storage order? So an hour later, I found out. So now that the Forest Service has issued theirs, we discussed finalizing the BLM one. And, you know, Wyoming and Idaho BLM have chosen not to go forward at this time with a food storage order. However, we in Montana are going to finalize ours. We updated it to be a little more consistent with the final Forest Service ones. It's out for review right now with our field managers and biologists. So we're hoping to finish that up this summer, seeing what we need to be able to publish it, what kind of changes we might need. And then one other thing that wasn't on the slide, as mentioned by Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks, we're seeing bears in a lot of areas that we haven't in the past in our BLM field offices. So it is affecting our NEPA analysis, you know, when we renew a grazing permit, or if we have a recreation project that we want to do. We now have these areas around Lewistown, the Billings field office. So in quite a few places where we haven't had to consider grizzly in our NEPA documents, we're now getting there. So yes, we want to get that food storage order done as well. That's it.
Great, thanks, Ruth. And finally, Frank, USGS.
Yeah, I wasn't able to connect with Claudia on any specific updates he might have had, but I'll give you a quick update from the Interagency Grizzly Bear Study Team's perspective. Just recently, we were tasked by the Yellowstone Ecosystems Subcommittee to organize a demographic workshop. The primary goal for that workshop would be to update various demographic parameters, things like vital rates, survival rates, reproductive rates, sustainable mortality rates, etc., for the population. And that will inform updates to the demographic chapter of the conservation strategy, chapter 2. And it's probably good timing because we haven't had a demographic workshop in about 10 years. Last one was in 2012. So it is definitely a point where we were planning to do something like that anyway. I should point out that this will be kind of an internal workshop. So this will be the study team members plus a few invited external experts. We always do that to get, you know, outside perspectives on our science. We plan to organize this. We can't really, you know, that's pretty big event because we have to get a lot of analyses done before the workshop to review that. So it's probably something that we'll plan for late fall. And I anticipate that, or we're setting it up so that we can at least present some preliminary findings at the December IGBC meeting. So that is the main update from the U.S. Geological Survey.
Thanks, Frank. Any questions or thoughts or follow-ups on any of those updates?
I'll just add one on Montana Fish Wildlife Parks. Jim Williams, our Region 1 supervisor, who's been instrumental in the MCDE, retired this year. Lee Anderson is his replacement going forward. So,
okay, so we have about 30 minutes from right now to the point where we've noticed the opportunity for public comment. We want to sort of surface the topics and get ready for the Friday discussion and the opportunity to come back together as executives. And we also need to get ourselves ready for this field visit tomorrow. So I'm gonna get that little bit of business out of the way first. I've been told that we may want to do some changing of that itinerary, some updates on the fly. as a result of learning about conditions. So I guess the first thing I want to do is, my apologies for folks joining remotely, but we need to sort of a head count of who is actually coming on the field visit on the bus. And I should note, and I think we put in the chat earlier that we'll state exactly where we're going to be stopping, and it is possible to follow the bus in a private car if that's of interest. But for the folks that are here and attending this meeting, how many are going to be on the bus and part of that group? And if you could raise your hands, and we'll try to get a hard count. So let's see. So 1, 2, 3, 4. I think that's what we guessed this morning, Toby.
What was your number?
19, 20. Yeah. So good. That and the bus will fit us. That's perfect. I do want to thank Toby Boudreau from Idaho Fish and Game and his team for helping with a lot of the logistics here. Also, Christy Johnson Hughes from Fish and Wildlife Service. So again, the idea is we leave on the bus tomorrow at 8 o'clock sharp from this Best Western Plus. And our thought is that our initial thought was we would stop at a couple of places to look at some features of note and be guided by some local knowledge. We were going to arrive at Bonner's Ferry at 9:15, which I think we can still do. And then really the question, Toby, is the afternoon or the lunch stop. So do you want to?
Yeah, our original plan was to actually go to the Boundary Creek WMA, which is right on the Canadian border. In fact, there's a ditch that the ditch rocks and no offense, Karen. Anyways, I went there on a free tour, and the mosquitoes are quite lively this year. It's a little bit later than usual, so I think what we'll do is probably go all the way up to Copeland, look at the underpasses there, and then go back and have lunch at the Hunter Lake WMA inside the shop, where we can be a little bit protected and probably less vulnerable to being carried away by mosquitoes. So.
Are they Canadian mosquitoes or U.S. mosquitoes?
I don't know, but if you get too close to the WMA, my phone says, "Welcome to Canada." Then we'll come back from there. We'll have all the talks at the WMA office.
So again, so that means likely, so 8 o'clock departure here. We'll do 9:15 to 10:45 or so in Bonner's Ferry at the county annex building. And then, up to Copeland and then back to MacArthur Lake is sort of the notional itinerary. For lunch, again, Toby has been instrumental in getting things for you guys. So it'll be sort of make your own sandwich, and that's what we have.
Okay, so we don't need to plan on a lunch.
No.
I have everything covered.
Okay.
So, and yeah, thanks so much for that. Okay. Any questions about tomorrow or thoughts? Anything on the comments? No.
You need to pay someone for the lunch. Thank you, Ed.
There is no such thing as a free lunch.
Great. Okay, so again, we've got now about 20, 25 minutes of executive conversation, and again, what I'm trying to do is come up with an agenda for Friday that helps you have this executive engagement and advance some of the conversations that now have been coming back over the last several meetings. So we've got some very sort of nuts and bolts, concrete things in front of you on the Bear Smart Communities program. We have the continuation of the conversation that started a year ago about the structure and priorities of IGBC. Again, we're structured with this executive group and with the subcommittees that are organized geographically around recovery zones. We had the conversation about looking at that and came out of that with, we're going to keep those geographic subcommittees, but we're increasingly looking to work in a hybrid manner, in a regional manner, on the topics of information education outreach, science, and conflict reduction. And we've heard a number of different things happening in that conflict reduction piece this afternoon. And so we have a whole conversation here about the higher level IGBC and its priorities and how it organizes itself to do work, how you organize yourselves. And then the third piece I've queued up here again for conversation is the subcommittees will be coming back to you in December with updates. They're going to be updating their 5-year plans. And so this is an opportunity for this executive group to give guidance. If your discussion here about priorities overarching can be useful going back to the subcommittees. And as has been mentioned before, this goes both ways. The Yellowstone Ecosystem Subcommittee has some things that they want you to know about and vice versa. So it's a lot, it's big. It's the end of the day here. So what I would really like to do is put questions on the table that we can think about, what would it take to get there when you have some discussion, and then we're back in this room on Friday morning.
Hey, Dave.
Yeah, Chris.
How about that now, or maybe on Friday at this time? Is there how are things going with the budget committee or the budget subcommittee? Because it seems like, when we start looking at some of these other initiatives that deal with funding, the idea that we had was the budget subcommittee would kind of present those to this executive committee to say, hey, this is where we want to make these recommendations of where we want to spend this money or spend this money on these programs. Could there be an update or something on that?
Yes,
To us?
absolutely. And so the good news there is that the portion, so there's two contributing streams to IGBC. The Forest Service, has supports my position. The interior agencies, have an interagency agreement with the Forest Service that supports the IEO grants, that supports the Bear Smart Communities work that we did this year, and the Bear Resistant Container Program. That's $100,000, and the agreements are in place and they're functioning and they work back and forth. And we can, like I said earlier, we can turn the dial a little bit of more IEO, less IEO, more Bear Smart, less Bear Smart. So in the year that I've been on board, I've sort of figured out how to do that. But I guess what I'm saying is, that there's not more of that coming. That's not likely how we're going to add capacity, except for the continuation potentially on the Bear Smart communities. But you're right. The larger budget issue is this potential for leveraging external dollars. And there's been conversations going, that a number of folks have been having about with partners about if this group, again, could identify priorities, could suggest where, this, as Ed was talking about, aligning priorities in specific places, maybe there's ways to leverage the outside dollars. So, but you're right. I need to bring the budget committee together, and if you've got specific questions, that's what I'm looking for, is sort of those assignments that we can take to the different constituent parts.
But we probably won't be ready. I mean, there's not going to be a presentation Friday.
No, I mean, I can give you the here's where we are in 22 and here's where we're going to be. Like, I'm assuming 23 is going to look,
You can do a status.
yeah, fairly similar to 22. Yes.
Yeah, I think that'd be good, because especially for us on our end, we're not going to meet till December. We'll be in our new fiscal year, so if no one wants to do 23 priorities, would be good for 20 December. Those agreements in place for transfer those.
Okay, so I guess, again, questions that you want this group to have in the mill here for Friday. And I know folks have traveled and we're getting to the end of the day in Pacific time, and people may have come from Mountain time, but anything else that we're missing here that we need to get ready?
Can we talk about, and I'm curious, with the states, so we've talked about Bear Smart today, we've talked about the subcommittee. On the structure, the IGBC, that discussion around the changing those recovery zones or adjusting, what's in front of us, David, as far as like what would be the decision, or is it are we gonna open that up and look at it? That's part of Fish and Wildlife Service, that's part of the states, or I mean, what
Well-
is in your head on that?
Okay, fair enough. So again, I think we're moving forward in this hybrid regional approach on IEO. So they have in their work plan, for example, the idea of doing another summit in 2023 that would bring together the folks that are practitioners in the field of information education outreach and social science and doing that work. So that one, I feel like we've got a good handle on. There's been a suggestion that we need to do a similar thing with science. And Frank, I don't know if you might have a quick update about the potential for bringing together the science team lead, the science leads from the, Are you there, Frank? Did you follow me?
Yes. Yeah. No progress on that yet, David, but I guess I will be in touch with the science leads from the different ecosystems to see if we can set up like an annual meeting among all the science folks and the science teams in the different ecosystems. I think that's something that would be certainly desirable and would have some benefits for the entire system. So that is in the works. Just haven't made the first contact yet. But I will coordinate that.
So that would be where I'm confused on, that still wouldn't be the decision place for the recovery zone changing.
No. So again, we in March, we put on the screen, sort of these overarching priorities, and people sort of did some brainstorming, and we have these 4 buckets of habitat science, IEO, and conflict, and trying to again, you're the executive committee, you set the course, and you sort of are the conveners of these subcommittees. They're doing work on your behalf, and so IEO is I feel like has a good path. Science needs to look at across the range. They've been more place-based historically, and so looking for opportunities, as Frank just said, could be useful. And then the one where there's a real question, and I guess I'll look at at Matt, Fish and Wildlife Service is on conflict, because there's additional capacity now, and then there's also we're joined by our colleagues from APHIS, Wildlife Services, and sort of is there some charge or some goal that IGBC wants to set around conflict reduction? And again, the question that was asked earlier about Bear Smart communities is the right one. Does IGBC need to do it, or is it happening already? There's many people doing work in this arena. So what would be the value added of saying we now have a hybrid conflict management team, and who would be on that, and what would the charge be and the reporting be? And again, just the callback here of when you were chair, Matt, you sent the note to the subcommittee saying, please identify, please report back to us on conflict work. And when that did generate quite a bit of activity, particularly I think in the YES and the NCDE subcommittees, and I think some of the others. But the question has now come back with this hybrid conversation of particularly around tools and practices and resources. Would it be useful to have an IGBC conflict reduction? And again, Bear Smart Communities is one aspect of that, but as Gary pointed out, then there's the ag lands and other parts of it, the non-residents, that potentially could be part of the agenda for a group like that.
You want me to respond to that? Yeah. So I think it makes total sense. I mean, I think in the last executive committee meeting, I suggested we consider bringing Fish and Wildlife Services on the IGBC. They're playing an increasing role in terms of their conflict, as is most people, right? We've added 5 people. It's not like the states have stepped back for the most part, notwithstanding some of the comments you had, Gary, about the legislation in Montana. So it just, the work just keeps getting more and more, and whether it's a big part of what IGBC does as an entity or what the individual entities of IGBC do, it's a big part of their management going forward, I think. So I think it makes a lot of sense to have that conversation.
Okay, so the challenge then for Friday is, to turn that sort of notional concept into, a motion, some specific request, and again, the reception of that request by this executive group will be improved if people know what's coming, and have a chance to think about it and question it and look at alternatives. And, so that one it may take some more time on. I'm hoping that VeriSmart, since it's been on the agenda multiple times, maybe we're closer on. But that's the idea, is to keep that conversation going and to give this executive group, the keys to the car. You're the executives, you set the priorities, you set these subcommittees or these working groups on their path. And it's in all cases, they have full-time day jobs, so it's only things that really do benefit from the interjurisdictional, the larger, regional approach, that adds and doesn't subtract, that it's complementary and not conflicting.
Maybe Ed will tie the free lunch to support of that motion, assuming he supports it.
Well, I certainly have some things to add to the list. I know we're getting late in the day. But, we talked about these things, I&E, Trans Conservation Area Subcommittees, it's in the charter and it's active and it's operating at that scale. And science is in the charter. It's not actively operating at that scale, but it's identified in the charter that way. And I think some of Idaho's top priorities would be, I think, addressed better with a transboundary science team. For example, attain and maintain recognized recovery and occupied recovery areas, and identifying demographic and habitat criteria and other conservation strategy elements for delisting and post-delisting management. Those criteria for the PCA and the DMA were updated in the GYE in 2022 and the NCDE in 2019. We've been beating that drum on the Selkirk and the Cabinet Yaak repeatedly identified in action plans to do those, and they remain undone. So some of that falls in Hillary's shop. Other influence outside. How do we get those things done that linger in the Selkirk and Cabinet Yaak? We had discussions on those in 2013 and 2016. We need to perform the monitoring to assess the criteria. First, we need to have the criteria firmly established. We need to provide information necessary for the remnant analysis to accompany delisting of DPSs if that occurs, and ensure conflict management capacity and resources. So those are certainly things for us that are important that we include in the list of conversation, and that's certainly going to pay for your lunch if we can get to those things.
Well, I think that's what I didn't say it quite like you, but that was the question I had, of how can we put that to rest, Ed? Because that is a topic that keeps coming up. I mean, not just for Idaho, but I think Idaho, Montana, Wyoming. So that would be a kind of a fourth thing, or are you counting that as a sub of the structure discussion? I'm thinking of how to frame that up for Friday.
Well, I think it's direction potentially to subcommittees as they reconsider
It's under the subcommittee.
Their action plans, and although unless the suggestion is that, and I just may not know enough yet, but Selkirk Cabinet Yaak, is that a different? Where would that? I don't know where that work originates. That you were referencing.
Well, it's a recovery plan recovery criteria for the Selkirk County Act. So it's in our recovery plan, but the subcommittee, Selkirk and County Act subcommittee is pretty active. And, you know, that's Wayne's shop, and that subcommittee tries to address those things together. Of course, it's our recovery plan, so we try and move together with the subcommittee. Conservation strategy the same way, and yeah, we need to do that.
Yeah. Maybe in lieu of doing other things that are on the board.
First, address the petitions.
First address occupied habitat.
We must not forget 5 new people to manage on conflict coordination. So it's not like they've been sitting around doing nothing. They kind of prioritize and triage everything on this plate.
Okay, well, that,
Lunch for everybody except Hogan.
so, but that does, so that's, we will learn, we will be hearing from some of the folks just mentioned tomorrow and can sort of look at that a little bit. Comments and thoughts on what Ed just put forward and how what else we need to put on the table as you're thinking about going off?
Wayne Case will, yeah, but they're able to address questions about.
Just confirm that you have time on Fridays to subcommittee providing direction back to the subcommittee.
Correct, although maybe Rick, you might share now the, like, sort of the discussion that you're looking for between the executive and the Yellowstone ecosystem subcommittee.
Yeah, I would like to make sure we have some time on Friday to update the executive committee on actions that the guest subcommittee failed to get to, even though they agreed to move forward with some conservation strategy updates back in the. So I think it's important for this group to recognize. Yes, subcommittee didn't get there. That's unfortunate. I think this committee needs to probably provide some direction back to yes. So,
And is that some of the stuff that came out of the meeting Friday? Okay. Well, it sounds like multiple folks want to talk about that, so.
Count me on the list.
Seems like a full agenda for half a day.
So that's what I'm looking to. No. So we will, yeah, try to refine this a little further. Again, there's a sort of concrete set of, endorsement or not endorsement of the Bear Smart Community Program as an IGBC program. The question about resources for that program, and then, the series of, for the IGBC itself as an overarching body, is there direction? Sounds like there is direction on IEO and science. Is there direction on some cross-cutting conflict work? There may not be yet. That may be something we have to think further about. And then the role or the interaction between the executive and the subcommittees is that other large body. And the particularly for those that the NCDE and the YES that have these conservation strategies. There's been a question here for a little while about the status of those, how the edits go forward. Are they major or minor? What's the role of the executives? And so this will be an opportunity to engage on that. All right, I'm seeing some nods. Questions now?
Yeah, I guess, I've had a lot of questions from various NGOs, participation in IGBC. And I know I don't know if I brought this up before, but I know that the subcommittee, we've got so many different NGOs that are involved in grizzly bear conservation, but are these, if we had, say, a conflict hybrid working group, is that something that we would be able to open, or we would want to for NGOs? And I know you've got we would have to think through, we can't have 30 different people on a working group and have it effective. But is that something that the committee would want to think about?
You know, one of the things David and I talked about, was it this morning, is we need to look at the charter on, you know, how we add. So we were looking at the executive committee.
Yeah.
On what does it say? And there isn't probably clear language on that, but we need to check that, Hillary, and because of, you know, whether it's APHIS coming on or what role could they play in, same thing with the subcommittees. It seems like there's more space on the subcommittees, but the process piece, and that's what you brought up this morning, is just, you know, what do we do? And we can change that, right? I mean, there's nothing sacred. But how do we look at what's there and then allow for, if we want to make changes. So that may even be a topic for Friday.
And again, Hillary, I guess, you know, again, if it's a working group, you know, conflict working group, I feel like the options are greater
More space.
than if it's a subcommittee or a committee. And if, again, I think form follows function. So if it's a private land conflict reduction piece and we're not working with private landowners or stock growers or other parties, it's like that, what, you know, how are we, you know, what's the real theory of change there? So yeah, that, you know, what are you trying to accomplish with the group? And that will then help dictate what is, you know, who do we need then at that table? Or is there some other table? Again, this was the conversation that took place in subcommittees on the conflict topic. You know, does it have to be IGBC agencies that are the conveners on these topics? Are there already conveners out there, you know, doing some work? But again, the capacity issue, our agencies do have expertise and capacity. So we're just looking for the efficient way forward on what we know is a growing need.
Yeah, to me, it's coordinating of so many groups doing many different things, and just being aware of that, for one, is important. And I'm not even aware of all the groups that are involved. And so, you know, it'd be nice, just almost like the IE Summit, maybe bringing everybody, maybe it's not a full working group, maybe it's a once a year get together and everybody share what they do and where they work, and resources available is the other thing. There's money in all sorts of different ways. NRCS now has a lot more programs available for conflict. And so I think a lot of people are not aware. I get questions all the time. Who's doing that? What resources? And it'd be nice to get people together and becoming more aware of that. How that happens.
Great questions, food for thought.
2 minutes.
Yeah, so any last thoughts then, I guess, as we pause and look for questions and thoughts and comments from members of the public? I'll ask the committee one more time.
I guess just that, all joking aside, that's a lot.
It's a ton, yeah.
4 hours, so maybe give some thought to like a
Priority.
like a timed agenda on each one of those topics, because any one of those could run several hours and we might not tie off any of them.
So yeah, so I guess the prioritization to me, and please feed back to me, come up, find me in between sessions, and, you know, let me know your real priorities here. You know, I feel like we need a block of time on the Bear Smart communities, a block of time on, you know, the continuation of the structure hybrid groups, although that sounds like that may be more blue sky and brainstorming, at least in the conflict realm. And then we need a real conversation about guidance to subcommittees for their next 5-year plans, and particularly related to the, you know, some of the core activities there on habitat and conservation strategies.
Seems like the two that would bump up would be the Bear Smart and then the subcommittee, and then maybe roll that other one if we have time.
Yeah.
But it seems like that's the highest.
But I can refine this, and please let me know if I've got that wrong, or you know, what the true you know, priorities are for you. So
Does guidance to subcommittees cover your issue, Rick? That seems like
That's what you said.
coming
Yeah.
from the subcommittee to us versus us to the subcommittee.
Okay, well, thanks a lot. I mean, it's just a tremendous amount of activity. I mean, it's incredible how busy you all are and how much you're all accomplishing. So thanks for sharing that this afternoon. I'm going to pause here now and we'll go to public comment. And I will start, I think, in the room here and sort of maybe alternate between the room and the remote. If you've got a comment, if you're in the room, obviously you can stand up and be acknowledged. If you could start with your name and where you're from, and if you could, keep it short and focused on our agenda, we'd appreciate that. And then if you're remote, you should be able to turn your camera on and your microphone to make that comment. So we'll start with in the room. I'm going to turn around and see if there's any comments here. And there is one. You're recognized, yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention a few things for USDA Wildlife Service. Name's John Stiver, Assistant Regional Director. And I was at a meeting, the last meeting, or was it last year or something, and talked a little bit about the non-lethal efforts and so on, and the increasing funding for non-lethal efforts and so on, both federal appropriations and cooperative funding. And I don't remember exactly when I was here, but typical of federal agencies, we got our budget late, but there was another 1.12 million in there for non-lethal. And the 3 grizzly bear states got a pretty good proportion of that funding. Wyoming, Idaho, and Montana got some. What we're able to do with that, getting it in June for the fiscal year, is going to be a challenge because, of course, we were on a continuing resolution. So we had to operate on last year's funding. So 3 months left and the funding for that year. So some of the states are using it for infrastructure because new positions need new trucks and 4-wheelers and equipment and so on. So, but I know that Idaho is doing some work, Wyoming's doing some work and so on. And the states are a little bit different. Wyoming Game and Fish does almost all the grizzly bear work. So we don't do a lot of the grizzly bear work there, but in Idaho and Montana where we do some, we're going to be putting that non-lethal funding to more projects and so on. So for instance, Montana has 2 fencing technicians, and we added another range rider technician up on the Blackfeet Reservation. So we'll have 3 range riders, and I know that Dalen Tidwell, who's the state director in Montana, intends to get additional folks next year. He's working on some infrastructure stuff, and then we'll be able to use that funding for more positions next year, maybe in the Gravelies or where there's some of the higher conflict areas and so on. And Jared Delius is here from Idaho. I'm not sure what Idaho is doing this year for non-lethal.
Yeah, well, just exactly what you're stating, John. Being able to put this money to work out in the field requires and also personnel. I do have five specialists that devote their time towards non-lethal activities, and at any time they do it, whether it's wolf work, the grizzly bear work, or black bear work. And so I would like to continue to channel some of this efforts and some of this funding for more grizzly bear stuff and grizzly bear opportunities. It's up here or over in Eastern Idaho, yeah.
So last year was a record year for both states as far as livestock depredation conflicts. Idaho had 22 investigations on livestock depredations last year, and Montana had 181. So it was a very high record year for both states. Interestingly enough, I think Idaho's at 8 investigations this year. Or,
it would show on that sheet, right?
Yeah.
Yep. It's actually a little bit more this year, but actually not a little bit, quite a bit more this year than last year. And,
depending on the time of year or whatever.
Quite sure.
So we did a snapshot in Montana too, and I don't know if anybody has any ideas why this might be, but depredations are down significantly in Montana. If you're taking a snapshot of right now. Last year at this time, we had done 90 investigations in Montana. This year, we've done 54. I don't, I'd like to say it's because of the non-lethal stuff, but I'm not gonna do that. You know, we had a serious drought, a lot less cows in the state, a lot of people sold cattle. A lot of people didn't go to some of their summer allotments. So any number of reasons, but that's I don't know, I'm not a good at math, but that's a sizable decline in number of depredation.
Ben's already on the job, John. He's got after it that fast.
So anyway, that was just some interesting things I thought y'all would be interested in.
Is that money you talked about, John, 2-year money, or is your money not 2-year money?
Well, the 1.38 that we got the first time, it went into the base. The 1.12 that we got in FY 22, I don't know how that goes. It's 1-year funding. Yeah, it's 1-year funding. And I've heard there's a proposal, I think, in the Senate for another 2 million for FY 23. But we're gearing up. But just like Hillary said, it takes some time. You don't just run out and hire federal employees, you know, in a month or something. So it takes a little bit of time, but it does give us some planning that we could plan for and see what we could do. And also the really kind of neat part is that we do partner with NGOs, you know, and funding, you know, and we've got a whole number of NGOs, and some may be on the thing here that provide funding to help, you know, make that funding even go farther and stuff. So thank you.
Thanks, John. So that was John Stiber from USDA Wildlife Services. Other comments? Anyone online that would like to make a public comment?
There are, but no one's raised their hand. Most people still on our agency. We do have people on there.
Well, it's also later in Mountain Time, where a lot of people may be joining from. We'll give it a minute here. If you've got something that you've heard today or something you want to share or some thought, this is the opportunity for that. And then again, we'll have another public comment opportunity on Friday, closer to noon. Yep.
Torture ourselves. I have that 7 minutes of silence. I get antsy.
Okay.
Yeah, 7 seconds. That's my limit.
Recap this?
Yeah. So, okay. So, having no further input, and thanks to APIS for giving us something. So good discussions today. And I guess I can look at the owl, but I feel like I need to look back here. You know, so kind of set the stage for the next couple of days. Good kind of recap from where we were at the last meeting, some of the topics. And I think we've all said, you know, Friday's going to be a meaty half a day, but we've got tomorrow on the bus where we can talk through some things too, and maybe, you know, glean a little bit more information, be a little bit more prepared. You know, for those execs that are not, with us physically, we'll, you know, if anything salient comes out tomorrow, we'll try to send a note to folks to just keep you up to speed if something that would help you in that Friday discussion, because we need everybody with us, not just the folks who are physically here, but all of you that will be joining. We need to hear from you, and so we'll try to give you any additional information if we get something tomorrow. And you know, just appreciate, you know, folks staying with us. This is important work. I really do think that this group, and not because we all agree on everything all the time, we obviously are coming at this from different viewpoints and different perspectives, but I think having this group together with that gives us a strength to really hopefully set us up for, I think, what we all want, and that would be this species recover to a point it could be delisted. I mean, that is, you know, the overarching goal that we've been working on for 40 years. And so I think the strength is us figuring out a path forward collectively. I think the species is better with us working on it collectively. And I think getting to those end goals stands a better chance if we are working collectively together towards that. So just ask that, everyone think about that over tomorrow as we're in the field. And then, when we get to Fridays, see what we can come up with. But I think this is a group that does some really good work, has done some really good work, and can do some really good work as we go forward. So I'm going to rest on that for now, David.
Great. Thanks so much. Everyone, great day. Look forward to tomorrow. We'll be loading the bus, 7:30, 7:45 timeframe for those of us that are here in Ponderay. And for those of you who are not, we'll see you back online again, Pacific time, 8 a.m. Pacific on, 8 a.m. Pacific on Friday. So,
And we'll send you, if anything comes out, we'll send a note out tomorrow.
thanks all.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.